jeung khilafah juga ulama pajuang syariah nepi ka mangsa runtakna khilafah ngabalukarkeun musibah rongkah junduk umat dingakasadaran naratas joang bangkitna Islam Tatar Sunda miboga lerata kiwari sumebat kasabudar alam jejak khilafah kita tersunda nagadurkan tekad sinatria sanajan lawak nu ngarobeda perjuangan muarek sudah jejak khilafah kita tersunda ngelingkeun pancen urang sadaya nanjeurkeun khilafah nepi ka jaya janji Allah nu moal sulaya. Khilafah kita tersunda nagadurkan tekad sinatria sanajan lawak nu ngarobeda perjuangan muarek sudah jejak khilafah kita tersunda ngelingkeun pancen urang sadaya nanjeurkeun khilafah nepi ka jaya janji Allah nu moal sulaya. Sulaya moal sulaya geus pasti dari Allah moal sulaya.
Respective and invited speakers, participants, and also the viewers of the Islamic Conference of Islamic Civilization. now and also on Royah TV viewers. Today we are going to again to see the second meetings of the conference, and we take the theme, the global call of Muslim intellectual for the Islamic civilization, development and sustainability. So before we start our activities, let's start our activities by saying Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Our agenda today, first opening, and the second, we are going to listen the Holy Quran recited by Ustad Fikri. For Ustad Fikri, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ardi wa ikhtilafil layli wan nahar la ayatin li ulil albab. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعد الله الذين آمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم وليمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون. صدق الله العظيم. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Ustad Fikri. Next agenda, we are going to listen a welcome speech delivered by HILMI advisors, Prof. Fahmi Amhar. Prof. Fahmi Amhar, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Welcome to the International Conference of Islamic Civilizations 2022. The world has witnessed an unprecedented an incomparable level of catastrophe which humanity has had to endure, not least the Muslim within it. Muslim souls are a part of the Ummah and have been enlightened with the light of knowledge to defend the Ummah, to lead them to emigrate to serenity and prosperity, and step into the light from global turmoil to global liberation through revelations. They have a role to contribute in all scientific fields, including government and law, economics, social science, education, language, culture, communication, health, technology, international relations, defense and security, and the environment. Muslim intellectuals are not scientists who are only busy in their academic dimensions. They are not only busy doing research, writing scientific publication in global journals, or raising citation and Scopus H index. No, they are not judged by it. Their intrinsic value is not determined in such indicators. Their intrinsic value is determined whether the knowledge they build and the knowledge they spread is able to build a better civilization or not. A civilization that humanizes humans, runs in harmony and sustainability with nature, and bring humans closer to their creator, Allah. This is a civilization that will not leave the fate of a group of humans to a group of invaders. This is also not a civilization that encourages humans to continue to compete at a global level so that they unconsciously abandon themselves from social and spiritual values, rape the environment, or oppression of other nations. But this is the civilization that is not colonized, nor does it colonizes, but liberates the world from colonialism. Muslim intellectuals are looking for how to explore Islamic civilization from Islamic teachings. Islamic civilization harmonizes religions, science, and politics, harmonizes personal tranquility, material progress, and social justice on a local and global scale. A Muslim intellectual should get an appreciation of Allah's omnipotence after studying science, not just matching verses, nor it's just looking for the wisdom of a Sharia, but he really mastered science, and the deeper science he mastered, the more submissive he became, bowing to the realization of God's presence in all corners of the universe. This is the dimension of Sufism. A Muslim intellectual should also study the history of both civilizations, and he will find that traces of Islamic civilization are everywhere. He will see that the ancestors of Muslims have incised charity in the fields of science and technology. Whoever uses science and technology today, goodness will automatically be sent to the scientists of our ancestors, whether they are doctors or astronomers, whether they are experts in jurisprudence or weapon experts. Admiration for this past achievement should not stop at mere nostalgia, but a determination that we will definitely be able to bring the glorious civilization back into the world as our ancestors did. This is the historical and political dimensions. A Muslim intellectual is also obliged to continue to seek inspiration from the verses of the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet, more than just the daily need for fiqh or everyday science. He will keep asking, why did Allah send down the verse in a sentence like this? When reading a verse about a drink of paradise mixed with ginger, a Muslim pharmacist or biotechnologist will encourage to explore ginger as a part of a big research. When reading a verse that commands human and jinn to explore the corners of the heavens and the earth, a Muslim aerospace expert will motivate it to create more powerful vehicles to realize the command in the verse. This is the dimension of technology inspirations. However, we should not be trapped in ta'wili science or scientific claims according to Islam without empirical evidence. Science is a word that must be verifiable by anyone. The truth and the truth is seen from predictions being fulfilled. If a theory is claimed to be from Tawhid, from the Quran, from the Sunnah, or the like, then if the theory fails to the test, don't let the blame be on Tawhid, the Quran, or the Sunnah. And lastly, every Muslim intellectual should naturally be encouraged to study science and technology that are useful for the successful implementation of the Sharia. Be it the Sharia of prayer or the Sharia of jihad. Prayer is fardu ain, but providing technology to bring water for ablutions for wudu is fardu kifayah. Likewise, jihad is a noble Sharia commandment to free the world from slavery to humans, to slavery to Allah only. And this jihad requires many things. Requires stable domestic politics, a strong economy, smart human resources, sophisticated intelligence to weapon technology that frightens the enemy. This is the dimension of fiqh of science. Science is in every command of the Sharia according to the rules ma la yatimul wajib illa bi fahuwa wajib. What is absolutely necessary for the completion of an obligations, then the law is also mandatory. And this is the widest arena. This is also important so that science and technology are also directed and applied correctly, not to be used to colonize, but to liberate human from colonialism. This is our aim in holding this international conference. Yesterday, our scientists had a lot of discussions about various things, from health technology to nuclear energy, from puppets for education to Islamic economics. We want more Muslim academics and intellectuals who make intellectual contribution to civilization, so that future of the Ummah will be brighter. In order for Islamic civilizations to be upright again, in order for Islam to return mercy for the whole world, may Allah be pleased with our deeds. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Fahmi Amhar, for the welcoming speech. And next, we are going to listen invited speaker, the first speaker from Professor Dr. Muhammad Bashuni. He is professor from Universitas Sumatera Utara. He will address natural resources in Indonesia, fact, management, degradation, and Islamic concept and practical. As you can see on the screen. Professor, you have about 15 minutes to deliver your speech. And after that, I will give some points of your presentation. Time is yours, Professor, please.
Okay, thank you, moderator, for short introduction me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim ajma'in. First of all, let's us thank Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for giving us good health to attend this important conference. And let me share my slide. Secondly, let's convey our salam to the
Okay, Professor, please.
no, please, I use my own slide is better.
Okay.
Okay, let's me continue. As introduced by the moderator, I am Muhammad Basuni, currently a professor at the Faculty of Forestry, Universitas Sumatera Utara. And as I am a scientist and researcher, I have some like the cut from the major indexer in the society, scientific community and society from the Google Scholar, from the Scopus, from the Pablon and ResearchGate and more others. Just this only for if you like to get closer with me. Okay, actually, it's time is run very fast, and 15 minutes. My talks I combine the natural resources in Indonesia, facts and the management, and root the problem regarding the degradation of natural resources management in Indonesia and how Islam solve this problem. Okay, moving forward to my next slide. Actually, the natural resources in Indonesia divided into the 5. First is land. So Indonesia is the largest country in the Southeast Asia. And from the land, we have like the volcanic soil, non-volcanic soil. You can see throughout the Riau area, Sumatra Island and Bangka Archipelago. And organic soils is we can find also some part in Sumatra, Kalimantan Island, and also in Papua. This is the first natural resources in Indonesia is land. And also the second one is air. Maybe we thinking air is not the natural resources, but from this the photosynthesis happen and also breathing. And also we can see in Netherlands, people using this air for their source of energy, windmill technology. The third is sea or ocean. Fortunately, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala give us the lots of the ocean in Indonesia, and Indonesia is the largest archipelagic country in the world. And maybe we don't know that we are the world's second largest producer of seafood behind the China, and we share with the Peru and some behind the countries producing the from the sea. And also salts. Unfortunately, Indonesia imported some salts to consume in our country, but we have the largest oceans, and we can produce the salts that important for our foods. And this is the strategies of location of Indonesia is from the Coral Triangle Initiative on the coral reef fisheries and food security. If this is our mostly in the eastern part of Indonesia, but it's so important as is the bathymetrics and geographic feature of Indonesia seas. We can see from the eastern part, from the Sulawesi to the Bali and also in the Banda, but it's a poorly that is important for the climate change from the sea. And as I mentioned earlier, Indonesia is the second largest of the processing of seafood behind the China and some other countries below of the Indonesia. And from the FAO Fishery and Aquaculture statistic, we see some islands produce more rich in the variety of the fish and some others product biota of the seas. And many others resources belong to the sea, like underwater plants, phosphates, rich rocks, wave, plankton, and pearls is also important derived for the Indonesian ocean. And the fourth is forest. I must talk in this forest because it's my discipline, the forestry. Then Indonesia so far has like around 90 or 99 million hectare of forest and spread around the country. And from the land use and land use change, this is the data from 1990 to 2015, the land use change and decreasing some area like the primary forest or secondary forest, but increasing for the estate crop like the oil palm plantation, rubber plantation. This means loss of our forests. And the five part is the mining resources. Indonesia also rich a country which come from mining resources, mostly derived from the gas, petroleum, and coals. And some part we can see here from the natural gas, coal, geothermal, palm oil, also including for the source of energy, as well as the oil itself, and cocoa, tin, nickel, and some others. And we summarize into the one slide why is Indonesia is a rich country in natural resources. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala bless us with abundant natural resources, and Indonesia become leading exporter from this part, like the natural gas, oil palm, and some others. Is I found from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources and Minister of Agriculture. And some energy also important in our country, like from solar, wind, hydro, ocean, biomass, and geothermal increase predicted 2025, like the increase at least 5% or 5% in total 17%, according to the Ministry of Energy. And also consumption in our country is mostly from the coal, crude oil, natural gas, and but some others also increasing. So with the highly diverse of natural resources, but we have some problem. The policy of natural resource development, money in Indonesia mine and natural resources are also controlled by the private sector and foreigners. And the second one is implementation the law, because we adopt the regional autonomy, we call autonomy daerah, and the authority of local government is strengthened both for the provincial and district level, so they have the power to delegate the central government to the region, issue the mining business permits IUP from 2009. This is make the problem of our resources. And almost 90% of our resources is managed by the foreign parties in the name of foreign investment. Unfortunately, it's going from the beginning of the new order regime, 1967, and is concerning foreign investment. And until now, the problem after the events of the omnibus law also similar happened in our natural resources, control not by government or not state, but controlled by the private private company and also a foreigners company. So we can compare this in the oil palm plantation. Who is the owners of the oil palm plantation? We can see here mostly of the private company. Indonesia has, at least in the Perkebunan Nusantara, but is decreasing, especially in North Sumatra, PTPN, we call PTPN, Perkebunan Nusantara 1, 2, or 3 or 4, but also the area is decreasing compared to the private sector. Like the Indonesia is very famous, Sinarmas and other Salim Group, Wilmar, and some others they own the most of the oil palm plantation. And from the land use change and land use cover change also decreasing, especially loss of the forest, but increasing of the estate crop, especially for the oil palm plantation and rubber plantation owned by private sector, not by the state or government. So from the primary forest or secondary forest also decreasing, and also from the land use, this study in Kalimantan and Sumatra. This is from Sumatra. The B and C in the Kalimantan is also decreasing a natural forest, a shrub, but increasing their mixed agriculture and estate crop, and also barren land and others. So this is part of the capitalistic development to increase the ownership of the private sector and decreasing the ownership of the state. And also forest degradation and deforestation. This is from the Margano et al. From 2000 to 2012, how the primary forest and decreasing, and the degraded forest also increase, and some lodging of concession as also the illegal logging increase, and also as well as the oil palm concession also increase in mostly from the Kalimantan, Sumatra, and the Papua Island. And also from the Minister of Environment and Forestry 2 years ago released the data, and the HP means hutan primer, primary forest also decrease, and production forest also decrease, and some for the conservation area also decrease. So the problem here is from the estate crop increasing the area. We also studied from other area, forest area, especially in mangrove area. We studied also, we released that within 20 years, from 2000 to 2020, 2020, almost 93,000 hectares lost forest in the mangrove area. So it's also how the development of the forest also losing some area. And my last talk, how Islam as the mentioned Professor Fahmi in the welcome speech, that as the scientist and also researcher, how we correlate with our subject with the Islamic view. Islam also regulates natural resources management. Of course, not only talking about ritual and moral, but Islam also is a system that able to solve all the problem of life, including the management of natural resources. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala says, "Wa nazzalna 'alaikal kitaba tibyana likulli syai' wa huda wa rahmatan wa bushra lil muslimin." And we have sent down to you the book as clarification for all things, and guidance and mercy and good tidings for the Muslim. So this is a guidance for us that if we cannot manage our resources according to Islam, so resulted in the degradation, deterioration, and some major problem in our country. So according to Islamic rule, natural wealth is part of the public's ownership of property, so should be managed by the state, and the results given to people in general. On the other hand, it is unlawful to hand management of public ownership of public property to the individual, like here, private, especially foreign ones. So among the guidelines in the managing public ownership, refer to the words of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, al-muslimuna syuraka'u fi salasin fil ma'i wal kala wan nar. Muslim are partner associate interesting in water, pasture, according to including forest and the fire, all the mining properties, reported by Abu Dawud. Also, salasun la yumna ma'u wal kala wan nar. Three things are not prevented from the other people: the water, the pasture, and the fire. It means all the natural resources should be owned and managed by the state, not to give to the private sector or the foreigners. So unfortunately, it is not happen in our country, and also one that evidence that all natural resources should be managed by the state is a hadith from the Abiyad bin Hamal, that he came to Prophet ﷺ, asked him to grant him as soul-laden land, and he granted to him. And when he left, one person in attendance with the Prophet ﷺ said, "Do you know what you granted to him? You granted him an unconstable water, al-ud. He ﷺ took away from him." So Mau'idu is the water in abundance, so flows continuously. It's like some mining property also like this. So it's not only about the source, but the most important is the flowing the natural resources of flowing water. So the messenger gives us the mind of Abiyat, that it's not soul mind, but this we talk this about the mind itself. So best hadis, public property should not controlled by individual, including private and foreign. So the focus is on the soul, but the mind. So when the Prophet ﷺ knowing the mind is like the flowing water, it's continuously. So it's just not allowed to own by the individual, but should be owned by, this is the community property, so it should be owned by the community and managed and controlled by the state. This is because the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the matter of the forest, fire and water state, all human align the matter. Therefore, he ﷺ forbids anyone to have it, while others are prevented. When we see in the why Ibn Qudamah in his book Al-Mughni quoted as Asal and Karim, mining goods that human convert and use without cost, such as salts, water, sulfur gas, mumia, petroleum, diamonds can be divided by individual property. So because all the Muslim needs, that's a kind of the community property. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, ladies and gentlemen, so it's my short actually to encourage us how we have a rich in natural resources, but we cannot handle or give this all the resources to the people, but only private sector and some foreigners enjoy this community property. So Indonesia is rich natural resources. We make Indonesia super of the world natural resources, and exporter and some others. But as a Muslim, I calling on you, all of you, that Kasus in the faith of Allah and His Messenger, every Muslim must be bound all rules Islamic Sharia. Therefore, all the matters, including in this natural resources, should be managed by we should return to the Al-Quran and the Sunnah. So whatever by determined by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and His Messenger must be implemented. So as the scientist or as the researcher, we know about this, and we should all the things in the perspective of Sharia. So let us hasten to count the provision of Allah and His Messenger by implementing all Islamic Sharia. The implementation requires the role of the state. This is because of many provision of Islamic Sharia deal directly with the livelihoods of many people, and mostly as a fardu kifayah. And management of natural resources without role of the state implementing Islamic Sharia, it is the people general who are defenses at case of the today. We have rich natural resources, but we cannot use, or we cannot give the advantage to us. So this is responsible of us as a Muslim scholar to implement, to call the government, to call all our stakeholders how they can implement the Sharia in especially to manage the natural resources. That's all my talk. Thank you for your kind attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I return it to the moderator. Thank you.
You are welcome, Professor Muhammad Basyuni, for very fruitful, clear presentation, and some points from Prof. Basyuni that we have many resources, but we cannot handle it. So that's our big problem, and also big homework for the scientists. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we go to the second speaker, again, I have to remind you, if you have questions, you may start writing or in chat column if you do not want to direct questions. But if you want to ask directly to the speakers for this session, you may raise your hand in the hands emoticon. Okay, and for the viewers, Royah TV in YouTube, you may write the questions also in the chat box. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to listen from the second speaker, Dr. Yasser Saber from Austria. He was former researcher in University of Vienna, Australia, and now he is a pharmaceutical consultant. Dr. Yasser Saber, can you start presenting your paper? And again, you have about 15 minutes to address your points. Dr. Yasser, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. It gives me pleasure to join you at this time. It's approximately 4 in the morning, so in the Fajr time in Cairo. I will start now with my presentation about health system between Islam and capitalism. Firstly, the content of my presentation will will deal with these points. Healthcare worldwide today, status quo, reasons of the situation, what we have at the moment, and the best healthcare in the history. I will give a short comments about it, if we had it already. Then health system and viewpoint of life, if the health system depends on the viewpoint of life or not. Then health system in Islam, and finally a conclusion. Firstly, the healthcare worldwide status quo today. What about the health system or healthcare at the moment? The language of numbers may be very clear for all of us. For example, 792 millions of people suffer at the moment from anxiety and depression disorders. 1.2 million, the last statistic in 2016, are HIV positive. More than 700,000 AIDS deaths per year in USA alone. Alcohol deaths worldwide, last statistic 2012, more than 30 million. And 800 suicides in the world, 2019, the last statistic. It means per 40 seconds there is a one case. 2020, it was per 20 seconds, one case. This is a situation at the moment, what we live. And when we speak about health system, the numbers are enough to understand what is the situation of today. 11 deaths per minute as a result of malnutrition. And we ask now, what are the reasons for this? Why? We live at the moment in a very high technological developed societies. Even this, we have all these problems. The first point is the profit-oriented healthcare system. The healthcare system, what dominates at the moment in the world, is oriented in profit. It means the profit is the criteria, the measure what we do. We have a different of laws like intellectual property and patents. Intellectual property and patents inhibit the scientists to have an open source for knowledge. And this is also prohibit creativity for solving different problems. Health insurance, it's an issue which be seated in the hands of companies, big companies, which are interested also to profit. And if the healthcare or the health system or the health of the people in the hands of the companies, you can imagine what can be happened. They are oriented to make only wins. And the pharma industry is at the moment is playing an important role also in the situation of what we live at the moment. There are a lot of diseases which cannot be healed at the moment. Even the high technological levels, what we have, there are a lot of people who suffers and on different diseases. And the question why, and the pharma industry is interested in gains, also profit. And at the moment, the COVID-19 what we have lived the last 3 years actually exposed the health system under capitalism. Also, the health system at the moment, all of us have seen what happened after the spread of coronavirus. This point will be dealt in more details with second speaker, Dr. Fawzi, inshallah. What I want to see here, the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed actually how weak the health system in the world at the moment. Now we can ask ourselves, is there a health system in the history which was better at the moment? And to answer this question, I give you an example for the first hospital what was built in the world. In the 88 years after Hijrah, the first hospital, and you can imagine the first hospital in Europe, in Paris, was built 9 centuries later. The hospitals in the Islamic era was fixed and mobile hospitals. And the hospitals in the Islamic history, it was not a house for treatment of diseases, but was a centers of teaching and research. They contains a lot of libraries, and you can imagine, for example, in Cordoba, there was more than 50 hospitals. Only in a city like Cordoba, there were no any Islamic city without hospitals. Cordoba at the moment, also 2022, may contain 5 or 6 hospitals. In the Islamic era, also for more than 1,000 years, there were more than 50 hospitals. Hospitals as libraries. In one hospital in Cairo, named Ibn Tulun Hospital, the library of the hospital contains more than 100,000 books. Not only that, but the hospitals in the Islamic history have they were planted with medicinal herbs to extract drugs directly. And you can imagine you have in the hospital what was called in the Arabic Al-Bimaristan. Al-Bimaristan is the house of patients. And it was not only a house of patients, it was a pharmaceutical company, extract drugs directly next to the hospital, and it is a center for teaching and for research, and a library centers too. Now, the next question is health system and viewpoint of life. In the health system depends on a viewpoint of life. It means there is a difference between health system under Islam and under capitalism. Of course, the viewpoint of life, the capitalist viewpoint of life, looks at the society as a group of individuals and not as the society as a whole. And in the capitalism, under capitalism, you know how the healthcare is privatized. Also, it lies in the hands of people, of individuals, not in the hands of the state. And also, how capitalism solves the problems. The last example is COVID-19. As coronavirus spread over the world, you have seen the Western countries have delayed to answer, have delayed to react on this pandemic, because they have seen this problem not as a human problem, but they have looked at it as a economic problem. It means they have delayed, and the costs later were huge numbers. It means that capitalism have a wrong way to solve problems. They don't look at healthcare as a problem of a human. of a human which must be satisfied, which must be solved, even it costs a huge number of money. Now, we come now to the next point, health system in Islam. What are the goals of Islam concerning healthcare? The second point, Islamic method of solving problems. Pandemic and quarantine. And as I said, Dr. Fawzi will deal with this point in details, inshallah. Medical education, medicines and pharmaceutical industry, and finally, in a conclusion. What are the goals of Islam concerning healthcare? What need the Islam to do? We know in Islam that preserving the physical health, as well as mental health, as well as public health, are a duty, fard in Islam. Comprehensive health care for all society members. It means the health care what must be given in the state doesn't depend on the color, the religion of the individuals, but it is for all of them. Healthcare for free, because it's a basic need for the human. It means it is a duty of the state to provide it for free. Also, you don't need to pay for it in the state under Islam. Not only that, but also in excellence and creativity way in health sciences. Also, the health sciences under Islam must be excellent and creative. And also rapid dealing with disasters and exceptional situations. This is the goals of Islam concerning healthcare. And the point of solving problems in Islam, how the Islam deals with problems generally. When Islam deals with problem to solve it, it doesn't look at it as an economic problem, as we see under capitalism, but as a human problem. It means a human problem must be solved. And when we speak about healthcare, we speak about the person, about a human. He suffers and suffers from any disease. This problem must be solved. And even it costs a lot amount of money, it's not important. What's important is how to solve this problem. This is a philosophy of Islam to solve problems. Health and medicine are basic needs. It's a problem of a human, not an economic problem. Must be completely satisfied. Pandemic and quarantine, the other point. Rapid response to infectious control is regulated 1,400 years ago. And you know the hadith of Prophet ﷺ said, إذا سمعتم بالطاعون بأرض فلا تدخلوها وإذا وقع بأرض وأنتم بها فلا تخرجوا منها. It gives the rule in a case of disasters or a pandemic, as we lived with COVID-19, how to deal very rapidly. The hadith of Prophet ﷺ said, if you hear of an outbreak of plague in a land, don't enter it. But if the plague breaks out in a place where you are in it, don't leave the place. And this hadith shows that Islam has solved the problem because he can deal very rapidly with disasters and catastrophes like COVID-19. The point on the medical education. Sharia principle, whatever was necessary to achieve an obligation, itself becomes an obligation. ما لا يتم الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. It means we cannot secure a medical care in the Islamic State without a medical education. And for medical education, we have to establish curriculum for training and listening professionals, monitoring and enforcing standards, maintaining standards for continuous professional development, sufficiency in training, aiming for excellence, educating the general public. The education is not only concentrated on the professionals, but also the general public, how to improve it. Medicines and pharmaceuticals in Islam. The aim of the pharmaceutical industry under Islam aims to the following points: establishing a timetable to reach self-sufficiency in making medicine, because in the state it's not allowed to be dependent on another countries, and it means we have to reach very soon self-sufficiency in medicines, because as we said before, medicines are an important issue, and important for the people, because they solve basic needs. The state provides all material resources to fund scientific research, the field of pharmaceutical industry, and drug discoveries, especially in developing vaccines and treatments for chronic diseases. And all of these costs are paid from Baytul Mal. Medicines and pharmaceuticals in Islam. The state prohibits all aspects of scientific monopoly, such as intellectual property and patents. Do you know if it's at the moment under capitalism, scientific monopoly, the big problem, which actually the big obstacle in the front of creativity, and such laws are prohibited in Islam. Intellectual property and patents. Patents also prevent or the great obstacle also to linking research centers, universities, and hospitals with pharma industry. It's a very important issue, because if we link the pharma industry to the actual problems what the society already has, it will be productive, because every problem in the society will be directly linked to the industry and will be solved. Not only with the industry, also the universities and with the research centers, because at the moment under capitalism, the pharma industry, it's not interested in the problems in the society, but as we said in the first file, it's interested only on the profit. And under Islam, this is not the case, because under Islam, the basic needs must be solved, and this is a goal of Islam. Search for therapeutic benefits in the natural resources that God endowed us with. Because we know the Prophet ﷺ tells us for every disease there is a healing, and we have to seek it. Finally, in a conclusion, the enormous health problems afflicting humanity with deadly diseases that wiped out millions of people, depression, suicide that spread are inevitable in the application of the capitalist system. While the bright era in the human history, which enjoyed a unique health system care, which people lived enjoying the finest health care, tranquility didn't occur except under Islam. And it was my final file. And finally, thank you for your attention. Wassalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very obvious presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Yasser. And also thank you very much, Prof. Muhammad Bashuni. Now we have about 40 minutes to go for the question and answer session. And I have one question from the audience on Zoom from the chat box from Mr. Zaini Zainal Mutakin. The question to Dr. Yasser, the question is health service according to Islam like health services in Cuba? And the next question is, are there any Muslim countries that carry out health service according to Islam? Okay, I think Dr. Yasser, you can answer directly, please.
Thank you. The first question, I don't hear it. The second question is, at the moment, there's no any country who apply Islam. It means there's no any healthcare system according to Islam. And the first point, sorry, I didn't hear it. the first question.
For the second question are there any Muslim countries that carry out health service according to Islam? I think there's no.
It's already answered.
And the first is health services according to Islam, like health service in Cuba. I think maybe Mr. Zaini asked you, like in Cuba is like has Islamic health service system. What do you think, Dr. Yasser?
In Cuba?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I have no ideas about the Islamic healthcare in Cuba, but it must be clear that in the different Western countries, there are a lot of not laws, but a lot of methods which be adopted from the Islamic era for 1,000 years.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yasser. Dr. Yasser, can you close your share screen? Okay, can you close the share screen? Okay, good. Thank you, Dr. Yasser. I have one person from Zoom who raised hand, Mr. Nur Ali Amri. Okay,
yes.
Nur Ali Amri.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I have one question for Dr. Yasir. As we know that we have many rules in the Al-Quran about health, about sciences, about many, yeah. But why Islamic society still
recording in
like
progress?
Now? It is cause of backward of our culture, or maybe you can say why is a Muslim still like now? This is my question. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Nur Ali, the question to Professor
Dr. Yasir.
Oh,
Dr. Yasir. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Yasser, please, you may answer the question.
Yes.
Why Muslims like now?
Yeah, brothers, as you know, there is no any country who apply Islam, and if Islam is not applied, it means the Muslim will live in a descended manner of way of life. It means all what we have at the moment as Muslims is not a reason for Islam, but because this is a reason of absence of Islam. And this explains the situation of the Muslims at the moment all over the world. And hopefully, inshallah, soon when Islam be applied, inshallah, the situation will go back, not only like the first era of Islamic history, but actually more rapidly, because the human being have reached at the moment a high level of technologies and scientific progress. And this will be under Islam, of course, very fruitful.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. There is one question for Professor Basuni from Rahima Ahmad. Prof. Basuni, can you answer what can we do for solving this problem? As we know that Prof. Basuni mentioned many problems in natural resources, in energy, and Rahima Ahmad want to ask you the solution. Okay, Prof. Basuni, please. Unmute, please. Sorry, Prof. Basuni, we cannot hear your sound, your voice. Sorry.
Can you hear my voice now? Okay.
Yes, clear now.
Thank you.
Clear.
So actually only one solution, back to Islam. Otherwise, we cannot solve this problem at all, as this is a systemic problem. So how we can give this all the community property to the private sector or the foreign sector? It cannot save the problems. Like now is the problem of the carbon, on the land use change, is all things should be solved by the states, not giving to all the private sector or the individual. So the important things now, as we are scholars, Muslim scholar, dear brothers and sisters, dear sisters. So first we have to back to Islam by learning what the Islam teach to us, especially in the natural resources. So, and we spread our ideas to the people, to the government, make like the policy brief to the government, as our group did, to give to the ministry how to we solve this problem. Like I think we all know that in the constitution that the earth and the water, everything is belong to the state and give to the people welfare. But the fact is not like that. So if we take the partial solution, like by make the Sharia I think it's not allowed Sharia constitution, but the important thing, as we are Muslim, we should learn how is Islam teaching us about not everything, but especially in the natural resources. And we know that this is the natural resources belong to the community and should be controlled by the state. So it is also we calling to the government to implement the Islamic rules, so we can save the problems. So otherwise, is we prolong the suffering of the society without any justice or fair the solution. This is, I think, my idea, my thought about the solution is even the solution is a long way solution, but at least we spread our idea, our knowledge to the people, and they should understand that the problem can be only solved by the Islamic view and Islamic thought about this issue. So I think that is simple answer for me, that back to Islam and how we learn deeply as a scholar. I think it's easy for us to learn some books of the Islamic system on the economy, or especially in the natural resources, and we can implement by the spread the idea, the opinions. Now, if the opinion voiced by the Muslim scholar, I think is maybe influenced by the government to accept this solution. I think that's all. Thank you. I return to moderator.
Thank you, Prof. Basumi. Dr. Yasser, I think
Yes.
Mr. Zeni from our Zoom clarify that Cuba is a socialist state, and maybe he asked you more deeply the difference between health system in Cuba, which is a socialist state, with Islam. Can you clarify more about this, please?
Yeah, yes. The question is clear now. It's a good question. If the healthcare in a state was given for free, it doesn't mean at all that's it's the same like in Islam, because in Islam the healthcare system is not only this topic. It's not only the costs who paid for healthcare, but it deals with different points. And the healthcare in Islam, in our presentation, we have dealt with different things. Firstly, how the Islam solve the problems. Secondly, how the Islam see this problem, also healthcare. It's not an individual problem like in socialism. It is the same, also the same topic, also like in capitalism. It's an individual problems. In Islam, the healthcare or health system in Islam, it take a look at the society as a whole, and only on the individuals as a human. This point is only fulfilled in Islam, because we treat a problem, a human problem, and this human lives in an Islamic society. This is the big difference between healthcare system in Cuba and healthcare system in Islam. It's not a matter of costs, but more than this.
Okay, still one more questions, Dr. Yasser. People think that
Yes.
people think in that what is it, advanced country like United States or Britain or British, they have a good health system, while you are saying that they have, what is it, like the problem, like the patent issues or the profit issues. If we compare with
Yes.
developed countries, okay, what do you think?
Yes. The problem comes when if we compare our countries at the moment with the Western companies. If we compare the Western companies with our countries at the moment, of course, the Western countries have a better healthcare system. Yes, but our comparison was between the Islamic care system under Islam and the healthcare system under capitalism. And we have given some examples from the Islamic era. It was in year 88 after Hijrah, means more than 1,300 years. And if you compare it at the time with with the healthcare system in the West at the moment, of course, there is a big difference. And for the Islamic era, not for the Western companies. Look at example. At that time, 88 after Hijrah, the Pimaristan, to the house of patients, hospitals. If anyone is sick, he goes there. Will be free from his clothes. I get new clothes. I get pocket money daily. I get supervision in the hospital. I get for he go sleeping a person who may tell him some of his stories, may make him some anashid, tell him some ayat of Quran. Also, how the patient was handled in the hospitals at the time is not comparable with the health system at the moment in the Western countries. And if we make a comparison, a correct comparison between Islam and capitalism, between West today and the situation under Islam in the Islamic era. But at the moment, our countries don't have any healthcare system.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Yasser. Right, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, participants from Zoom, viewers from YouTube, Royal TV, you may ask questions by chatting, write your in chat box in YouTube, or you may raise hand from the Zoom. Okay, I have questions for Prof. Muhammad Basyuni from Mr. Julian Sigit. Two questions. The first question is, are environmental agreements initiated by World Organization a complete solution to the problem of deforestation? This is number one. And number two, if this in this situation continues without any improvement, so how long we are facing catastrophe? Okay, please, Professor.
Okay, thank you for the question. For the first question, actually for the practically not the comprehensive solution, I think maybe yes, but we should understand that the capitalistic country will not escape us from the colonizations. So I think most of the Western country take advantage from this issue, especially for the carbon trade like this, that we cannot handle ourselves. Actually, many Muslim scholars are aware about this, that the source of deforestation is mostly from the policy of the government, like the converts from the forest to the non-forest use, especially for the now is a oil palm plantation, coconut plantation, especially in South Sumatra. For the oil palm plantation is mostly in the Sumatra, Kalimantan, and also Papua. So by this solution, I think still we lost many forests, especially for the carbon sequestration, and also produce oxygen for the human being. And also from other reasons, I think is we should make like the what I say is a comprehensive solution, as I mentioned in the first question before this. So I think for the practical, maybe in the short time we can withstand of this solution by the moratorium, like this, a moratorium not to convert from the forest to the non-forest use. But we are thinking about this, brother and sister. I'm also a bit practical. When we are in the forest and in the field, and we see some growing forest, so I think it's just like a part of the instinct of the authority. I think we like this is some area for the conservation, but in the fact they also cut down the trees, and also if there's some damage, they can convert into the estate crop and also plantation, like this, not to return to the government like in the previous, and the damaging lands they return to the inhutani in outside of Java regulation, but now they own themselves, convert from the degraded forest to the oil palm plantation. Like this is the thinking of the private sector, how they make advantage as much as possible. So I think by the suggested by United Nations like this, to because you know, and the developed country, the source of the emission, like not ratify the protocol Kyoto like that, but they force the developing country like us that has many forests to, of course, it's important to stop the illegal logging or some exploitation, but the important thing is how the government stop this conversion from the forest to the other land use. We fortunate during the pandemic, deforestation is decreasing, because actually during the pandemic no activities. Of course, in the field I went somewhere and no activities for the logging and some cutting down the trees because of the pandemic, but not of the because the deforestation is decreased, actually because of the pandemic itself. So I think the first question by Dr. Julian is we must think ourselves, because by the submit our solution to the United Nations like this is not the solution, because the big countries or Western countries understand, but because the developing country cannot manage well our natural resources, especially the forest, by like this is enter the Guinness Book of Records in the past. Within every year, the deforestation is almost 1 million hectares every year. So it is also like the set for us. And but now is important thing we understand the problem, and we also take the best solution back to the Islam. Only Islam can solve this problem. And also the second question is related to the first question. Until when? Yeah, until we understand and our aware is increasing by educate the people educate the people around the forest and around the sea, and we understand the poverty is high, very high. The people near the forest and the sea, and they can see how many tons of the log and the previous years. They can see the many tech boat carrying the log and the woods bring from the forest to the harbor, and they cannot see this is the property, their property, community property, but they cannot do nothing. So I think is until we aware increasing by return to the Islam, only that the solution, because even the practical solution by moratorium like in the couple years ago, but it still cannot prevent the deforestation and degradation, because of we understood that the private sector goal is to get advantage much as possible. They cannot concern about the conservation, about the environment, because especially now is the omnibus law in Indonesia. So it's very difficult, because all the with like the no environmental assessment like now. So it's difficult to solve by the problem with the view of this current situation. So only back to the Islam, how they can solve this problem, because the awareness now awareness of the people is a bit increased, but not only view of the environment, but the view of human being, because we should talk about our next generation. So by the convert the forest to the other land use, and also deforestation still occur until now. I think that's my answer. Thank you.
20 years go, is it still safe, Professor?
Sorry,
20
I
more,
cannot.
20 more years still safe in Indonesia?
I don't know actually, but if the problem continue like this, so we cannot imagine. Maybe we can see forest in the museum. Maybe I'm not sure. But the problem is now is the extensive use, like from the private sector is also increasing. So if the government cannot handle this, the situation getting worse, I think. Even the many scholar, not only Muslim scholar, aware about this environmental issue, but the problem, the policy is still the view of the capitalistic view like this. So I think it's still we face some challenge, how we confirm the convince the government, how they I think they should learn from the past, past, that the source of the source and drivers of the deforestation is from the land use change, like the abandoned pond, or some oil palm plantation, and some others is a source of the problem in the for the forest deforestation and degradation.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your answer, Prof. Bashuni. We have Dr. Julian raised hand, and maybe you ask Dr. Yasser. Yeah. Okay, please, Dr. Julian.
Thank you. Explain in description from Professor Ahmad Bashuni. I want to question the second to Dr. Yasser. Dr. Yasser, that you say Islam has a great help system. How to make it happen in practical step? And because this requires a large source of fund. And the second, the medical and paramedical file are important commodities for profit in the capitalist system. The question is what will happen to the medical and the paramedical industry in the countries that adopt the Islamic system. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Yasser, are you still with us? Okay, please.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Very interesting question. The second part of the question, it's clearly, I heard it clearly, but the first part, please, can you repeat it again?
The first question, Dr. Julian, can you?
Okay, the first question.
The first one.
How to make it happen in practical step for Islam agreed health system? Yeah, because this work requires a large sort of fund. The first and the second, what will happen to the medical and paramedical industry in the countries that adopt the Islamic system? Thank you.
Yes, yes, it's clear. Thank you, Dr. Julian. Very interesting questions, both of them. I start with to answer the second one. The second one is how to realize it under Islam, to have a pharmaceutical industry which is not profit oriented. This is a question. If we look at the moment at the pharma industry at the moment in the world and under capitalism, if you compare costs of production, also the actual costs of production with the prices of medicines, you will of 30%, also 30% the costs of production of medicines worldwide, and what the pharma industry gains is a huge number. It means even if you make it under Islam, not in this manner, the pharma industry and the private sector under Islam had the ability to make great wins too. Also, it's not that's the problem of non-profit or profit-oriented industry, but the main topic of non-profit-oriented pharma industry, it means the pharma industry will be oriented to solve the problems in the society, not only to gain money. Of course, they will also gain money because they will never work for nothing. It's not a charity organization, but they are companies. They want to win too. But what the pharma industry wins at the moment in the West is unbelievable. Yes. For example, the COVID vaccines. A company like BioNTech or Pfizer have gained more than $20 million in a short time. And the actual costs for production of these vaccines is not so much. Or another medicines for HCV, for example, a package of 30 tablets costs 30,000 euro. It is a huge number of a price. The costs, the actual costs of the tablet is not more than one euro. This is a problem. But profit-oriented pharma industry means they will be directed and oriented to solve the actual problems. We have at the moment a lot of diseases over the world, in Africa, in many development countries. For this disease, you don't have any medicine. Even it costs nothing to produce it. This is what I mean, profit-oriented pharma industry. They produce medicines, very expensive medicines, because they are focused on what they gain or win. The first part is, or your first question, what about how to make it practically? It's true. How to achieve the health system in Islam practically? Yes. When we speak about a health system, we speak about rules. We speak about ahkam. It's not mainly concerning technology or technological aspects. technological aspects and technology and all the knowledge what we have at the moment, it's of course will be used even if it's from capitalist countries or from a non-Muslim scientist. It's not the matter. The matter is how to rule, how to apply these rules. Also, for example, our vision to the disease, our vision to a health care. What's the health care? It's a problem of a human, and this is exactly what the Islam deals with. Also, the Islam rule this problem. The Islam solves these problems, and this is implementing of Islamic rules, even in economic or in health care system or in any system. Also, we speak about rules. It means implementing of it from the first day is very easily. It's not a problem at all. But what the other part, which deals with the technological aspects or knowledge, is also has nothing with the Islam health system at all.
Okay,
I hope the questions are answered.
Right. All right. We are running out of time, but I have one from YouTube and also with final statement, closing statement from Dr. Yasser. The question from YouTube is that many hospitals, especially in Indonesia, maybe also in your country, are very expensive. And so people say that poor people cannot be sick because they cannot afford the hospital. So how Islamic system solves this? And also your final or your closing statement. Okay, the question is also with your closing statement. People say that hospital are very expensive.
I have.
Yeah, and also maybe
I got it.
Yes, and how Islam can solve this, please. With your
okay. We got it. Okay, we have spoken in the presentation about how Islam look also deal with this problem. Healthcare, also a disease of any individual in the state is a basic need. Also, healthcare is a basic need, and basic needs in Islam must be completely satisfied. This is a viewpoint of Islam. Even the individual is a Muslim or non-Muslim, but he lives in the state. This is a basic need must be satisfied, and it means it will be financed from Baitul Mal. Also, Baitul Mal is a place which finance health system, healthcare, and even it's not enough, the state has to take from the rich people money to solve these problems, because it's a duty for the Muslims. If anyone is sick and ill, it's a duty of the state to solve this problem. If the resources is not sufficient, the state has to take money from the people who can do it, because it's the duty for all of the Muslims to solve such problems. But at the moment in Indonesia or in Egypt or in a country, in our countries at the moment, of course, the hospitals and all the health system is more a capitalist system. It means if you don't have money, you cannot be treated. Exactly like in the USA. I think in the USA, the health insurance, it's not spread everywhere. There are a lot of people who cannot go to the hospital, to the doctor if they are sick. This is the point.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Yasser, for your nice presentation. And final statement from Professor Muhammad Basyuni, and also with the question from YouTube. The question from YouTube is how we overcome food crisis in Islam, and also with including your final statement, please, Professor Muhammad Basyuni.
Yeah, I think about the food security is not only the responsible for individual and community, but it's important is the responsible for the government. How government create the labor and create the more job for the people, and also create how we can withstand with the the food security by educate the people, and they can diverse of the food itself, like the functional foods. In our group, we initiate the using the functional foods by utilize the fruits in the forest. So we examine the how the carbohydrates and some vitamin or some mineral of the foods, and the society or the community near the forest can use as the functional foods. Of course, it's not the major of the foods like the staple foods like rice, but they can use for the daily, because most of the forest produce the fruits produce the fruits whole here. So we examine by this from the laboratory. We ensure that the fruit is safe for the people. So it is also, but this is very very like the little efforts for our group. It's not all the but the governments, local government, like the in the professional or the district, or the, of course, in the governments by the Ministry of Agriculture, ensure that the people can utilize the local plants, like the fruits and the leaf or itself. So I think it's also one most important thing, as we make ourselves is not depending on the other countries, like export some foods. I think it's also we can do for the preparing for the if in the near future the Islamic civilization come to us, and we can implement all the Sharia, then we can prepare our society. It's our society, how we face like the colonized country attack us like this. So it is important. I think in Indonesia, when I was a kid, it's very famous song from the Kusprus. So if we throw the stick to the land, so it's become the food like this. So it's because of the our land is very good for the some plants. So I think it's also better for us to prepare this. So the food security is very important, and food dependence is also food independence is also important for us. And my closing statement is all the thing in this dunya. I think Allah Subhanahu wa Taala provide us the book and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad SAW. If we can implement this as the prosperity, and as our lives getting better, and by back to the Islam, so we can manage everything from A to Z, especially in the natural resources. What our vision, what our goals will be achieved soon. Thank you.
Okay, you are welcome. Thank you very much, Prof. Muhammad Bashuni. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the participants of Islamic Civilization, International Conference of Islamic Civilization. Before we go to second session, we have break about 10 minutes. But I think you have to still stay on Zoom. And after that, Brother Panji Agnoto will moderate the session. Thank you very much for the invited speakers. I hope that the insight can be very useful for us, and also the participants. If you have questions, you may contact the committee, or maybe you can write the question on the chat. Thank you very much. I think that's all for the first session. Thank you. We have break about 10 minutes. Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alaikum salam.
Tahun baru Hijriah baru saja membuka lembaran baru peristiwa. Umat Islam bersukacita meskipun tetap dilanda problematika. Kenaikan BBM, tarif dasar listrik, hingga gas LPG yang nampak menggila. Harga pangan yang semakin sulit untuk diterima, dengan iringan kemiskinan yang kian merajalela. Belum lagi masalah lapangan kerja yang semakin tidak tersedia. Ribuan generasi kita berdesakan mencari kesempatan. Ya, lihat saja. Di sisi lain, limpahan kekayaan alam, emas, minyak sawit, minyak bumi, dan ragam hasil bumi lainnya yang semestinya menjadi nafas segar warga negara hingga kini nampaknya tidak pernah bisa dirasakan. Lalu, bagaimana bisa kita bertahan? Sementara itu, generasi muda yang diharapkan nampaknya telah banyak termakan jebakan dan jeratan. Jeratan kesenangan yang sejatinya menyesarakan dan menghancurkan pemikiran masyarakat. Di tengah gempuran kekuatan besar sistem ekonomi kapitalis, paham sekuler liberal, bahkan sosialis komunis yang terus mengancam, kebangkitan Islam hingga saat ini terus menjadi harapan untuk mendobrak dan membawa perubahan. Maka disinilah peran penting para intelektual muslim yang memiliki ragam disiplin ilmu untuk menjadi penggerak kebangkitan umat dalam menyelesaikan berbagai persoalan, baik itu problem ekonomi, pendidikan, sosial, pemerintahan, hingga hubungan luar negeri. Para intelektual muslimlah yang memiliki kemampuan untuk berperan dalam membangun masyarakat dan membawanya menjadi masyarakat Islam. International Conference of Islamic Civilization 2022, the global call of Muslim intellectuals for the Islamic civilization development and sustainability.
Ratina sajarah tata suna nugema ripa pakai mengke tage jeung hilafah nu jadi user daya pemimpin umat.
نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الذي لا نبي بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي أما بعد. I'd like to welcome you all back to the second session of the conference. I'm Panji Agnyoto, and it's my pleasure to host this morning's discussion with our big topic, the global call of Muslim intellectuals for the Islamic civilization development and sustainability. Because the viewers here are mostly, if not all, are Muslim intellectuals, hope you all notice that the word discussion is meant to be very interactive, slightly different format that we had yesterday in plenary session, of course. For any one of you willing to raise a question, for example, from YouTube, you can easily put it on the comment box that are available on your streaming. While those viewing from Zoom, you can either raise hand to put it forward directly, or maybe you can do it through Zoom chat. So ladies and gentlemen, intellectuals, researchers, brothers and sisters in Islam, health crisis like the one that is enduring hitherto is one of the most striking, unprecedented, and unparalleled calamities. And I believe it's still fluid and dynamic. It keeps changing. And maybe what we all know about the virus is nothing but just a surface, let alone the lesson that it has passed on to us, at the expense of millions of lives of people around the world. So to evaluate what has happened regarding the issue, we have invited a speaker who is going to deliver a 20-minute speech. He's a neurologist with a subspecialty in neuro-ophthalmology at the Neurology Institute in Florida, United States of America, and also a fellowship of neuro-ophthalmology and postdoctoral research at Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, and also a fellowship at University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, and also medical school at MISR, University for Science and Technology. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Fawzi Abraham.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. I would like to thank you for this invitation to participate in this great conference. And I would like to talk today about the COVID-19 pandemic and how it exposed the weaknesses of the healthcare system, of the capitalist healthcare system. A few issues I'm going to talk about. Number one, about deficiency in healthcare resources. Number two, about the social way of life in Western countries. Number three, the intellectual property rights. And number four, vaccination issues. Number five, the scientific research issue. And all of these issues and its impact on the healthcare system. Then I'm going to talk about conclusions of these issues and then solutions to provide for these problems. Number one is about deficiency in healthcare resources, including providers, facilities, hospitals, schools. As we know, the main problem that faced the healthcare problem during the pandemic, especially by the beginning of the pandemic, was the deficiency in healthcare hospitals, deficiency in providers, doctors, nursing, ICU equipment, including ventilator, even deficiency in the mask for protection from the virus. As example, in the United States, there are 98,000 of ICU beds and 160,000 of ventilator to serve 330 millions. So this deficiency actually pre-existed prior to COVID, but what happened during COVID with more patients? It did expose all of these deficiencies and problems and actually pre-existing problems. As we note in these two graphs here, on the right side here, the countries with most critical care bed per 100,000 inhabitants. As example, with number one here among these countries, United States with 34 critical care bed to serve 100,000, despite in this graph, the United States was like #1 with the number of critical care beds. Despite this, as you see in this graph here, this is many hospitals in the US were running critically short of ICU beds during the pandemic. With the red color here represent the ICU occupancy rates of more than 100%. So ICU beds were over-occupied more than the limit and more than the available beds to serve the patients in several states. And when we say ICU beds, we are not just talking about a room actually. It's more a whole team who's providing healthcare to this room, involving providers, doctors, ICU doctor, ICU nurse, equipment, ventilator. So when we say deficiency in ICU room or bed, it's a deficiency of a whole team to provide this type of care to these patients. And this is, with these numbers, it's a pre-existing problem that was exposed during COVID pandemic. Again, the shortage and deficiency was not just in the hospitals or ICU beds, as we see here also in doctors and nurses. As you see here, these are the average, the countries with highest density of doctors to serve 1,000 inhabitants. As example, in the United States here, 2.6 doctors to serve 1,000 inhabitants in the country. Nurses, about 11 nurses. So deficiency, hospitals, in ICU rooms, ICU team, doctors, nurses. So that's why when there was more patients, it's the healthcare was facing very big problem in taking care of these patients. Number two, the social way of life in the Western countries. As we noticed during the pandemic, there were more cases in the Western countries in terms of sick patients, in terms of patients in the ICU, also death rates. And it was noticed that there were more sick patients or more patients in the ICU among elderly. Number two, also patients with chronic diseases, and also in immunocompromised patients. So these represented the main risk factors. And again, so we note more cases, more death rates in the Western countries. And it was noted that there are several factors and variables in the Western culture that created the problem to be more worse. As example, as I mentioned, chronic disease is one of the risk factors to be more sick and to be in the ICU. So we note that there's more prevalence of chronic diseases and its influence in the pandemic in the Western countries. Also, I'm going to talk about the social system and the social life of seniors in the Western countries, since we said among the risk factors, chronic disease and elderly. Then we need to study what's the prevalence of the chronic disease in the United States and what's the social life and the lifestyle of the seniors in the United States. Also the average life expectancy and the nutrition and its impact on the health. Also the immunity and the immune system. As example, chronic diseases. Based on the CDC website in the United States, 6 out of 10 adults in the US has a chronic disease, one chronic disease. And 4 out of 10, like 40%, at least they have minimum two diseases or more. Chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, cancer, lung disease, stroke, these are chronic diseases. So 60% of adults in the US, they have at least one chronic disease. And 40% at least 2 chronic diseases. As we see here, also the prevalence of chronic disease in the US is going up. Since 1995, 118 million. In 2030, expected to be 171 million. So based on the CDC website, there are several different factors in the United States that contribute to this high prevalence of chronic diseases. Number one, excessive alcohol drinking. Number two is the poor nutrition with low fruits and vegetables. Number four, the physical inactivity. Number five, tobacco use. So these are the four main factors that affected the prevalence of chronic diseases in the USA. As I said earlier, the more chronic diseases, the more patients get sick with COVID, the higher risk to be in the ICU, the high death rate. And the reason behind of this chronic disease is number one is alcohol use and the poor nutrition, the physical inactivity, and tobacco use. Alcohol use, as example, is a major risk factor for different chronic diseases: hypertension, diabetes, stroke, cancer. Besides chronic diseases, accident, domestic violence, suicide, homicide, effect on pregnancy, and this is based on the CDC website. And it caused about 95,000 deaths that is related to excessive alcohol use in the United States every year. So almost 100,000 deaths related to alcohol drinking, to excessive alcohol use in the United States. So we did talk about chronic diseases and how it's affected by different factors. This causes more chronic diseases, more patients who are sick. Number two, another risk factor during the pandemic was elderly. So elderly, I mean, in the United States, population of 330 million, the people who are more than 65 years old are 55 millions, and more than 85 is 7 million. And the number is increasing. The US population is aging. As you see in this graph here, the blue color represents the population with age from 65 to 84, and the yellow with more than 85 years old. You see here in 2020, there was 47 million from 65 to 84 years old. In 2040, they're going to be expected to be 65 millions. And more than 85 years old in 2020, 7 millions, expected to duplicate in 2040 to be like 15 million. That's why during, and the majority of these people, they live in senior home, nursing home, retirement houses. They are not being served by their families. And this created a risk factor actually. Like when you have 200-300 seniors, elderly, who live in the same house, when a virus gets there, someone gets the virus, it's going to be very easy to spread to everyone because they are being served by employees who serve them, who get the virus, and the virus keeps spreading. So this creates a major risk factor in the Western countries based on the Western culture. That's why this slide here is a screenshot from the New York Times. And this was in 2020, in December 2020. More than 100,000 of deaths were linked to the nursing homes. About 40% were linked to the nursing homes. So this is how a certain culture will impact this pandemic, like what happened in the senior homes. Number three is the intellectual property rights and the COVID vaccine. There are different types for intellectual property, including patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. And here we're talking about the patent, which is a government-granted monopoly to build, sell, or use invention. And there is a condition and prevent others from doing so. And this is lasted valid for about 20 years. So prevent others from doing so. This was one of the major problems during the COVID pandemic. So that's why the companies, the vaccination companies, were competing. They were competing for this and preventing others from doing the same. As example, one of the main problem during the pandemic, they said like the one company had like, let's say, contract with different government to produce millions of vaccines. But this is time consuming because they're gonna produce vaccines to supply several millions. At the same time, based on the intellectual property, they are preventing others from doing so because of the intellectual property. Think about it. If they allow each country to produce exactly what any vaccination company produced, you could get vaccination supply to the whole world within a few weeks, rather than depending in one or two or three or four or 10 different companies and preventing different countries and different companies from doing so because of intellectual property. Example of the intellectual property was the TRIPS agreement. It was signed in 1994, in which the World Trade Organization called for a meeting at that time, was signed by 140 countries at that time for intellectual property rights. And this created a problem, as I mentioned, during the pandemic. This was published in the Lancet Journal in December 2020. South Africa and India, they did submit application to the World Trade Organization to waive the right or to suspend the intellectual property rights related to the COVID. But this application was denied. So poor people, poor countries are deprived of the healthcare, but rich individuals and rich countries, they have more access based on the intellectual property rights and the companies in these rich countries. So number 4 is the vaccination issue. Again, we're talking about the same topic here. We note different issues during vaccination. Number 1, it was like more a political competition. And it was like more the politicians who are talking about this vaccination issue, and became like more like COVID-19 vaccine racing between politicians. And also there was economic issue, which is competition between pharmaceutical companies, and certain companies even, they did seek protection from the governments for adverse effect. So this influenced the vaccine production and the vaccine distribution. So this is an example. We all recall these situations during the pandemic with the competitions between the politicians during the COVID vaccine race, different talks from different politicians in the United States, Russia, China. It was more like competition rather than being as in collaboration to solve this humanitarian problem. And again, as I mentioned before, like companies, they did seek protection from the government. As example here, you can't sue Pfizer or Moderna if you have severe COVID vaccine side effect. The government likely won't compensate your damage either. Pfizer given protection from legal action by UK government. In a comparison to this, to the hadith by Allah, Fatima, daughter of Muhammad, والسلام, were to steal, I would have her hand cut off. Rawah al-Bukhari. Again, about the unequal distribution of the vaccines, as you see here, this represents the high-income countries, the percentage of distribution between 40 and 100%, while the upper middle income goes down below 40, while the lower middle income goes below than 20, while the low income below than 5%. So you see, the more income, the more access for vaccine, the more distribution. This is similar. This graph was from January to May 2021. Another graph here on March 2021. As you see here, the high and upper middle income countries have secured more than 6 billion out of 8.6 billion of vaccine doses. You see the high income countries here, upper middle income, lower middle, low income. Despite the high income countries represent between 15 and 20% of the whole world, they secured more than the rest of the world. They secured 6 billion out of 8.6 billion, despite they only represent no more than 20% of the population of the world. This is the data of the vaccinated people by January 2022. China about 90%, upper middle income and high income more than 80%. So the lower income, the less vaccination. China, upper middle income, high income, India, lower middle income goes down to 40, South Africa less than 30, lower income countries less than 10, Nigeria less than 5. So the more the income, the more the vaccine. And this is initially created by the more distribution of the vaccine initially to the higher income countries. This similar graph here, as you see here, the high income countries, then the lower middle income, then upper middle income, then the lower income. So the lower income, less than 10% of vaccination, as we see here in the graph. And this is from 2020 to 2022. Again here, rich countries, as I mentioned, will get access to COVID vaccine earlier than others. As you see here by the green, the expectation, this graph was in 2021. So green is access to vaccine by end of January of 2021, like United States. While the red color here in Africa is on 2023, 2 years after United States. And this by itself facilitated the spread of the virus, because you isolated in distributing the vaccine to countries based on income, based on rich and poor country. Based on this, you provided more vaccines availability to the rich countries, to higher income countries, which represent less than 20% of the world. While the rest of the world, you delayed the vaccine. So this by itself created an environment for the virus to spread more in the rest of the world. There was a study done in one of the US universities called Northeastern University. If rich countries monopolize COVID-19 vaccine, they did 2 strategies here. They did study a strategy for the death rate if the vaccine was distributed only to high-income countries first, versus if it was equally distributed. They found out that 33% death averted if the vaccine was only distributed to high-income countries first, versus aversion of death of 61% if it was equally distributed. So this means vaccine distribution to high-income countries duplicate the death rate versus if it was equally distributed. This was at Northeastern University. Also about scientific research, again, this is like in rich countries, intellectual property rights, and this impacted the research, created a competition between the companies rather than collaboration, also created competition between the politicians, while in the other countries or poor countries or the so-called third world countries, most of them, they signed agreement with the World Trade Organization for intellectual property rights, and this restricted the ideas. And beside this, governments, they don't support research, limited resources, limited guidelines, always dependent in the Western countries on guidelines, on medications, on vaccines. Conclusions. So this is, this is a summary for all of these issues. So we note these multiple problems during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's a pre-existing problem, but got exposed during the pandemic. Number one, political influence on the healthcare problem. Number two, as we note, vaccination rates among different countries and companies. Also the competition between the pharmaceutical companies. Also the intellectual property rights. Also the vaccine production challenge. Also the unequal distribution of the vaccines. And again, this facilitated the spread of the virus. Also certain variables and risk factors in the Western countries based on the culture. As I mentioned, the prevalence of chronic diseases that's being influenced by other risk factors like alcohol drinking, physical inactivity, diet, immunity. Also the lifestyle of the seniors, living in the senior houses and the senior homes. This facilitated the spread of the virus. So this impacted like more cases, more patients who are sick, more elderly who are sick, more patients in the ICU, more death rates. Also the third world countries depend on the production of the vaccine from other countries. The whole world is waiting for US, China, Russia to get their own vaccine, and they are just waiting for someone else to solve the problem. And this is the main point here, is the one who's providing the solution for the problem, or the current system who's providing the solution for the problem, is looking at the problem as a financial or economic problem. So from this understanding, they provide solutions. Rather than looking at the problem as a humanitarian problem, they look into it as an economic financial problem. So their primary measure of action while providing a solution for the problem is money and financial gain among countries, companies. So having all of these factors, it's all related to the current system that is providing the solution for the problem, which is the capitalism. So it's basically, it's not just a COVID-19 problem. It's an ideology problem. The current existing ideology that is providing a solution to this kind of problem based on this ideology. It's an ideological problem in the capitalism. And COVID-19 exposed all of these problems in this ideology and in this system. So in providing a solutions for these problems, then basically we don't need a political influence on a healthcare problem, on a healthcare issue based on political competition rather than collaboration to solve the problem. Also, we need the state to provide resources to support research, support the studies. Also collaboration rather than competition. Also no intellectual property rights that restrict inventions. Also to support the vaccine production and clinical research. Also to avoid the unequal distribution based on high income, low income. Should be like fair distribution as needed to the countries. Also no bad habits in the countries like alcohol drinking, and we know alcohol, how it influences the chronic diseases and how chronic diseases influence the rate of infection and the death rate. Also to be self-dependent and produce your own vaccine rather than depending in Western countries. Also the main issue here is to look at the problem as a humanitarian problem and to provide all the solutions based on this understanding that it's a human problem, it's a humanitarian problem, rather than to look at the problem as economic or financial problem. And all of these solutions here, you will only find it in Islamic system. So having and implementing the Islamic system will provide solutions for all of these problems and for other problems in the world. Not just healthcare problem, but also other different problems that the whole world is struggling and facing. And these are a few hadiths that the Islamic system provides for humanity. And these are my references. Jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for the invitation to participate in this great conference.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan to brother Dr. Fawzi Abu Khalil for giving us perspectives on the issue. And we have already seen that there are so many facets that are shadowing, the global pandemic. And among all the problems, among all the intervening interests that is actually going on was, the economic interest. And that leads us to our next topic of discussion. So, brothers and sisters in Islam, I believe that no one can dispute that we are now living in a tumultuous economic and political era. And now we've seen concomitant eclipses on both sides, the leadership and its system. And of all lingering problems that baffle not just the lay people, but also, the experts, the economics, it's also economics, with its cyclic crisis that is inevitable, just to explain why our lives are the way they are. So to heat up our discussion regarding the issue, we have invited our next speaker. He's a young, talented speaker far from UK. He's a man who I'm sure going to enlighten us on the issue, as he has also written a book entitled Comparative Economics, Islam's Panacea to the Maladies of Capitalism. And he's also a researcher in economics and philosophy at the University of London. He holds both doctorate and also Master of Philosophy in the same college, in the same university, University of London. And also he holds a Bachelor of Arts in Economics at the University of Cambridge. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brother Farouk Ibn Qaisar.
My talk, or at least the talk I was given, is actually on the resilience and prosperity under the Islamic economic system. I just want to thank the organizers for inviting me, of course. You should forgive me, I don't speak Bahasa, but I speak some English, so I'll try my best. And it's 4:30 here in the UK, so if I fall asleep by the end of it, you'll know what happened. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, inshallah. So I wanted to just begin by actually painting a picture about the times that we live in. Indeed, as the host rightly mentioned, we're living in some unprecedented times. We see that, the global economic situation at the moment is quite dire. We are at least seeing some of the most unprecedented supply side shocks that the world really has seen, at least since the Great Recession. So the damage from Ukraine is contributing to a significant slowdown in global growth. So economists estimate that the global economies of the world will decline from 6.1% in 2021 to around 3.6% in 2022 and 2023. These are huge reductions in global growth that are unprecedented. Beyond this, so beyond 2023, global growth is forecasted to decline to around 3.3%. So almost half we will or may expect to see the world shrink by. There are war-induced commodity price increases that we're seeing as a result of the continued invasion of Ukraine. And there are other pressures on prices that have led to inflation in 2022 to actually rise to 5.7% in advanced economies on average and 8.7% in emerging markets. And this is something that is also unprecedented. I think in Indonesia, inflation is expected to to reach a 7-year high or something, I read earlier. And in addition to that, Bloomberg recently put Indonesia on the 14 out of 15 emerging markets that are going to be plunged into recession over the coming years. We're also seeing not only supply side pressures, so supply side pressures, by that I mean obviously issues related to production, which include obviously mainly oil, but we're also seeing demand side pressures as a result of the post-COVID recovery. These are also things that are contributing to inflation, and we're expecting this, of course, to rise significantly in the near future. Unemployment is low at the moment, but we expect, of course, that to return with full force with a strong sign of recessions that most economies are predicting at the moment. But this situation, it's not new at all. Okay, we've seen it before, and beyond that still. The Great Recession, many people might argue, had different origins, but it still had very similar consequences in the advanced world, and that spread globally. When the US fell apart, so did the rest of the world. And the Prussian diplomat Clemens von Metternich, he said that when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. Today, it seems America has caught COVID, and the world is essentially dying and decrepit, and really on its final legs. So clearly, from the picture that we're painting right now, capitalism is not resilient, nor is it prosperous. We have been really first-hand witnesses to a global systemic chaos in response to the pandemic, government failure on a scale that is hitherto unprecedented, and we don't seem, at least within the discipline, to see a clear solution to these issues. And we've discussed many of them, of course, in the conference today. A big question you might ask is, why is it not resilient? Well, the first sign of the crisis, i.e. the pandemic, there has been, or was at least, a total breakdown of fiscal and monetary policy. Interest rates had already been at their lowest since the financial crisis of 2008, and even their reduction during the 2008 crisis did very little to actually influence the economy due to things like liquidity traps. Quantitative easing, something that has now usurped monetary policy across much of the advanced and developing world, turned out to be pretty useless and even damaging to the economy, failed to stimulate the most of the advanced world in 2008, and actually has led to harsh inflationary pressure today as a result of the sheer amount of unbacked spending and printing that has taken place across the Muslim world and of course the advanced world. Central banks, have had no other option in any case, because they were basically unable to reduce rates further than what they were at the time. Okay, so now we're seeing inflation, they're actually hiking them, which is absurd, right? These are unbelievable sites that are redolent of crises in the 1970s and the 1990s. So something's gone wrong. And, if it was once or a one-time event, perhaps we would have blamed some defunct politician or economists that are usually at the helm of government or central banks across the world. But it seems to be happening again and again. And so we have no other course to chart other than to blame this capitalist system. So my talk is basically going to just be split very briefly into two parts. I want to talk first about the resilience. And to me, when we speak about resilience of the Islamic economic system, we are speaking about a system that deals with exogenous shocks. When I say exogenous, I mean shocks that arise from outside the system. I won't speak here about how capitalism is endogenously failing. Basically, it's failing internally, and that much is very clear. It's a strong reality, I think, that's accepted by most economists, even non-Muslims alike. But instead, I'm going to speak about how Islam manages external shocks to demand and supply, like those that we're seeing today with issues, for instance, with the supply of oil and so on. My first point is preemptive. There are elements of the Islamic economic system that I often like to define as preemptive. The reason why I do that is because they are elements that are either automatic or set in place and do not require the action of the state. The Islamic economic system creates a society whose capital has already been divided in such a way that at the time of random crises or exogenous shocks, the poor do not suffer as much as they do in capitalism. With wealth-based circulation, the reality of the less wealthy are not that they're living on the margins, but they actually have some buffer to help them manage unexpected future crises. In other words, Islam, through its distributive policies, that is through the various state taxes and expenditures, would have already created an outcome that fares society better in the event of crisis. This is an excellent example of resilience. It has organized wealth in such a way that before crises happen, they are essentially less hurtful to different classes within society. Another example of such preemptive resilience is Islam's ability to automatically react to crises due to what I like to call nominal flexibility. If there is a shock, maybe it leads to the market not being able to clear, okay, in the short run. Often we find in capitalism that there are fixed contracts and harsh unions to prevent wages and prices from actually changing temporarily or even permanently to new market conditions. And we're seeing this in the Western world significantly now as a result of these inflation issues. The Islamic economic system promotes shorter contracts so that wages can be adjusted quite easily. And also unions are generally prohibited. In fact, it's rather forbidden to actually rebel against someone you've signed a contract with. Rather, the state is the intermediary, or acts as the primary means for workers to actually try and resolve their issues in a civil and structural manner. So crises that are beyond the control of the state do not have to result in a prolonged battle with the private sector. Rather, markets can clear efficiently, and this is actually preemptive because it's automatically set up for the labor market. And now, because my talk, of course, is quite brief and I only have such a short time, these are only some of the ways that I mentioned here that Islam can preemptively deal with things that haven't yet manifested yet. But of course, it's not sufficient to rely on these elements. We need some proactivity. Okay. Now, agents, they're obviously more resilient to these shocks, be it due to social concepts. For example, capitalism has no sort of concepts to be able to deal with harsh conditions like qada or taqwa or rizq min Allah. So, you know, Islam already has an advantage conceptually, and it has also the institutions to preempt these crises. But the state needs to be actively involved so that workers are not exploited and that crises are actually internalized well. The leading solution in the Islamic economic system is the state to organize distributional outcomes. By taxing the rich and those able to pay it, it's able to transfer much needed wealth to those who need it most. And beyond this, of course, the state always has dedicated reserves in the Bayt al-Mal, namely the zakat, to use during these times of crises, whose collection and spending is, of course, uninterrupted and never really tampered with, far cry from what we see in many Muslim world countries. And we see that perhaps this is the biggest reason why capitalism has failed to be resilient to crises, and quite the opposite. And it's so amazing. The rich thrive during crises, and the elite and the wealth of the elite have grown to proportions hitherto unprecedented in the history of the free market. And unprecedented it was, lo and behold, during the coronavirus pandemic. They have wealth to spare, whilst the rest of the public clearly writhe in suffering with a government that does absolutely nothing for them. So this is the resilience of Islam, and you can see, and of course we can discuss this further given the time, that it creates a prosperous and sustainable economy. Resilient economy. I wanted to talk a bit about the prosperity of the Islamic economic systems. And when we speak about prosperity, for me, we're speaking about growth that's high and sustainable with outcomes that are just and equitable. Okay, I won't speak about how capitalism has failed to achieve either, because this is much is well known. It's exhausted now, and many economists agree with this. But briefly, how Islam actually managed in succeeding to actually achieve prosperity. Well, when it comes to sustainable growth, Islamic economic system does not unnaturally expand the growth rate beyond the natural rate of output. Sustainable growth implies growth that is steady and a reflection of production. The economic problem in Islam is best captured by a priority on distribution. Whilst growth is essential, it's not the be-all and end-all, and it doesn't require manufacturing from thin air. We have seen countries countlessly in crises as a direct result of this unconstrained predilection for growth, where politicians and central bankers are quite happy to debase their currencies or exhaust their tax revenues to promote a figure of GDP that the average public are simply not a consumer of. This is not the metric that the Islamic economic system uses for its success, and as a result, it is not the victim of harsh booms and busts due to negligent macroeconomic policy. This is true prosperity, a society with optimal allocations and a level of growth that is able to accommodate a growing population, nothing excessively more, nothing excessively less. The second point I want to mention is equitable outcomes. Through a number of policies, Islam ensures that capital is circulating within the economy. This is in fact the focus of the Islamic economic system, and it's the ethos behind all policy. Take, for instance, the surplus wealth-based taxation system. It's well known in capitalism that the biggest crisis at the moment is inequality, which plagues prosperities across the Muslim world and the advanced world for that matter. It's well known that these progressive income-based taxation systems that have spread across the world like wildfire have failed to equalize incomes, and that inequality is actually far worse when you take a small look at capital. It's clearly more efficient, as the Islamic economic system proposes, to tax the minority elite on their capital than the majority who are not on their incomes. Small percentages on a larger number, a limited number of vast sums of wealth yields just the same as large percentages on many smaller incomes. Islam is ahead of the game when it comes to creating a prosperous economy in which capital is distributed equitably between the rich and the poor. The last thing I want to mention before I conclude, of course, I know that time is short. Sound money and sound finance, okay? The bimetallic system that Islam proposes, okay, certainly yields a far more stable monetary system and financial sector that the fiat system ever could. For a prosperous economy, Islam places the cornerstone of transaction, which is money, of course, and prioritizes it in terms of long-term strength and stability. Okay, and it's only the bimetallic system that can actually achieve this. And we are seeing at the moment, at the height of COVID and the COVID pandemic, and now, of course, we're feeling the effects, the total capitulation of the fiat system. We are seeing issues like depreciation. Okay, fiat money we know is intrinsically worthless. It's not pegged to any commodity or real asset. And it's an important problem because any unbacked currency is prone to manipulation. And we're seeing exactly that during the post-COVID era. Okay, and this is an endemic phenomenon, and it's peddled by these principles of profit and utility maximization. In fact, the dollar has lost approximately 98 to 99% of its value since 1965, relative to gold, which is amazing. We're seeing inflation right now, massive levels of inflation, and as we have no doubt seen, increasing the money supply forces the price of goods and services to rise significantly. Okay, and we are seeing this at the moment in most advanced and developing countries. Purchasing power, okay, depreciation has led to a titanic reduction in purchasing power. Okay, the amount that you can purchase in the marketplace has reduced significantly for the same nominal amount of wealth that you held in your pocket. Okay, there are more notes chasing the same number of goods. These rises in prices, okay, these depreciations in currencies has caused agents like consumers and investors to lose total confidence in currency. And this volatility has ultimately skewed trade, skewed the market, subverted the medium of exchange, and totally corrupted a basic fundamental in any macroeconomy. The last thing that fiat has created, which is cycles, okay, we are seeing, and we will see with certainty, another recession on the horizon. That fiat money is one of the underlying reasons why the business cycle continues to be a prominent feature in advanced capitalist nations. These cycles, of course, are characterized by booms and busts, and we are seeing now that the world will soon enter one of the deep recessions comparable to the Great Recession of 2008. So the Islamic economic system proposes a unique and novel, not even novel actually, pro-historical monetary system, of course, the gold and silver standard. Okay, gold is, of course, a metal. It's innately valuable, and it's a fixed currency that does not get debased as easily as fiat. The ratio is entirely dependent on the system that we are implementing. And of course, as Muslims, we are proposing a fully backed system. So it's not subject to some random depreciation by the whims and desires of politicians and central bankers. It secures the exchange rate. It doesn't allow, for instance, countries to totally manipulate their, for instance, balance of payments as a result of subverting the value of their currencies. It is secure. It's money that is backed by hard commodity, a physical quantity of specie or bullion. So agents, they can use it and know that in the future, their money is not going to be worthless. And this leads me on to, of course, the next point, which is that there is some long-run stability in this monetary system that the Islamic economic system uses as a vehicle to prosperity. Historically, inflation under the gold standard, which is one of the key things that all of you will be facing, all of us will be facing over the next term. Inflation on the gold standard was rare, often totally suppressed. In fact, between 1880 and 1914, inflation under the system was 0.1% per year in the United States. That's a huge amount of time and such a small percentage in question. And lastly, when it comes to business cycles, if we are implementing a sound monetary system that is not being subverted according to discretion set by the central bank, we know that these business cycles, assuming they're endogenous in origin, are not common, and that they are tamed, and that they are completely eliminated in the long run by the monetary system in question. So, what is clear, just to conclude, I won't belabor the point, all right? Islam as an economic system is both resilient and prosperous. It creates a society which successfully prioritizes what matters for the public, of course, and does not hold them up to chance, and does not manipulate them by the wills and desires, of course, of politicians and central bankers. There are increasing numbers of crises that are occurring within the Western world that raise incredibly pertinent questions. And there does not seem, in any sense of the word, to be a solution to this defunct capitalist system, except for, of course, the Islamic economic system, which I think now is becoming much, much more common when it comes to being discussed as an alternative within even the discipline of economics. You would be surprised, at least within Western academia. I will leave it there, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for listening. أقول قولي هذا استغفر الله ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله
Waalaikum
وبركاته.
assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, Jazakallah khair to Brother Farooq for giving us, the strengthening description on, the resilient aspects of Islamic economic systems, and also that it's also prosperous, and not just prosperous, not just being prosperous and also resilient, but it's also simply a way of life that the Muslims have to abide by. Okay, before we get back to Brother Farooq and also Dr. Fawzi to to involve in a question and answer session, I'd like to move on now to the next speaker. So our next speaker is also quite well known to all of us. He's actually a professor from Indonesia now, from the United States and the United Kingdom. We move back now to Indonesia. So he's a professor of communication and community development from UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, and he holds a PhD in communication and community development from IPB University, and he also holds a Master of Science in Communication for Rural and Agricultural Development, and also Bachelor of Science in Science and Economic History from Indonesia University of Indonesia. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Professor Dr. Maman. Please.
Okay, thanks. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Waalaikumsalam ala umuri dunya waddin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain, amma ba'd. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidna ilman warzuqna fahman waj'alna minas salihin. Ladies and gentlemen, sister and sister. I choose this topic, the challenge of sustainable agriculture development in Indonesia and Islamic solution. Why I choose this topic? Because we see here in Indonesia, there is a probability for food scarcity, then also food insecurity, and also there is a high probability for unsustainable development of agriculture. I think this is a big problem So we need an Islamic solution. How to solve this problem? Okay, the issue to discuss is the first is the importance of food security for human life, then the real condition of food security in Indonesia, and the various issues toward food security in Indonesia, the control of the investor on land, and the proper food management, a solution to food security, conclusion and implementation. Okay. Food security is a very important topic to discuss because it has strong relationship with human existence and sustainability. Okay. The indicator of food security, according to the economists, is food availability, food affordability, and food quality and safety. This is according to the economic view. So the food should be available in affordable condition and in quality and safety condition. But unfortunately, based on this indicator, there is not prohibition to import food or even staple food from the other countries. So we afraid Indonesia will be dependent on food import. This is very dangerous and jeopardize the human life. So we actually need the Islamic solution. Okay. Here we have the Indonesia food security rank. In the light of above three indicators, Indonesian food security grade is in the 60s from 113 countries in the world. I think it's very below, very low food security. And also within the Asian countries, the Indonesian food security is in the 6th grade below Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, and Thailand. And Indonesian food security index doesn't yet become the dirty big country. I think this is very serious problem that have to solve. Here we have the data about the index and also the rank. So here we have the list of Asian countries from Indonesia until Laos, and then also this is we have the rank of food security in global, and then this is the rank of security in Asian countries. So within the Asian countries, is still low, below the Malaysia, actually below the Singapore, and in the global rank, the Indonesian food security is in the rank of 60th. Also, this is the problem. Okay, I would like to present the various issues toward food security in Indonesia. The first is the food security. I see here the problem of land support for food security in Indonesia. I mean, the land support is very low. I have the data based on the indicator of deforestation, agriculture, land conversion, land degradation, and water quality due to the chemical input. The economist places Indonesia on the 109th rank from 130 countries in the world. It's very low. So I would like to say that there's very low support of plan for food security in Indonesia. In the light of the same indicator, Indonesia take the position of 111 rank from 113 countries in the years of 2018. I'm seeing our reference is the economy 2016 and the economy 2017. Land support for food security and food self-sufficiency in Indonesia is strongly weak. A serious problem need to solve. Okay. The other issue is I would like to present here the decreasing of agricultural land sites. So from we have here 4 agricultural census in Indonesia in 1963, 1993, 2003, and 2013. We held the agricultural census every 10 years, but unfortunately, the result show that the land size of agriculture here continuously decreasing from 16 million hectare to 15 million hectare, 14 and 18 million hectares. This is a very serious problem. So according to data that we have from the Central Land Agency, now the land of agriculture in Indonesia is only 7.46 million hectares. This is very serious, and I think the land will be continuously decreasing because there is not sign to stop land conversion in Indonesia, and the land is actually controlled by the capitalistic investor. This is the serious problem. Okay, so I'm moving. What is the problem? 1 minute. Oh, what's that? Okay. Also, the serious problem is the value of agricultural land protection. I would like to say that the land conversion massively increases, and it is most likely uncontrollable due to the many interests of land uses, like industrial estate, office facilities, housing, and so on. The armed investor lobby to use land in accordance with their interests, and of course, out of the paddy farming. The land use is most likely controlled by the investor. I mean the capitalistic investor here. Many farmers also disagree with the ban of land conversion because of the small revenue of food farming, especially for the farmer who see the chance to use their land outside the agricultural sector. Yeah. This is also the problem. I think I emphasize, especially for a farmer who see the chance of bigger benefit to use their land outside agricultural sector. Okay. Also, rather difficult. Well, what is the problem? And so,
is everything okay? Okay, Prof?
Okay. Here we have the farmer rejection to establishment of sustainable food agriculture area. And this establishment of food agriculture area is mandated by the law number 41/2009, in which the local government is obliged to form the sustainable agriculture area, which is banned to convert. But unfortunately, the land area is the individual farmer property. Thus, there is a strong tendency of the rejection of the farmer to the planning of local government to establish food sustainable agriculture. This we can see here the food providing become the farmer burden, the poor farmer burden, small farmer burden. So this is I see the injustice situation that should be resolved by Islamic view. Also, I have a research. This research is conducted several years ago in Bangor 2 in the Baru region, West Java, Indonesia. So we want to know what is the response of the farmer to the planning of establishment of sustainable agriculture area. So this is the farmer who has high education level tend to reject this program, and also the farmer who has outside agricultural field, the job outside the agricultural field, tend to reject because they see the bigger benefit which probably got from the job outside the agricultural sector. Here, I would like to emphasize why the farmer reject the ban of land conversion. Thus, the prohibition of land conversion create potential losses for the farmer to benefit from selling land and land conversion. In fact, based on our research, many farmers get more income after selling their land and changing the function of agricultural land. In addition, rice farming land belongs to the individual farmer. He should have optional right to use the land. Comparison with the benefit of the rice farming sector with other sector, we have the data that if we use the land for agricultural activity, mean that we got benefit one. But if used for other sector, the benefit will be about 20 until 100. So the farmer tend to reject the program of land protection for agriculture. That is why we have also the data in this context that the young farmer tend to, they have high unwillingness to have an activity in farming sector. So here, I would like to say that our farmer in Indonesia are the old farmer above the age of 45 years. It is predicted that in the next 35 years, the farmer will be disappear, and Indonesia strongly will be depend on the food import. It is vulnerable for the political instability, and Indonesia will be controlled completely by the other countries because of the food scarcity. So the probability of food scarcity. Here also the result of our research in West Java, in Cianjur area. So we identified what is the perception of the young farmer to the farming activity in pre-cultivation, in planting and plant maintenance, and in harvest and post-harvest phase. So, and also we identify the tendency to sell the inherited rice field. So the statistical tests indicate these three variables has a significant effect to the tendency to sell the inherited rice field. And also the farming unwillingness has a strong, highly strong effect to the tendency to sell the inherited rice field. I would like to say from this data that our agriculture sector in Indonesia is actually jeopardized by unsustainability. I would like to say this is the real problem. And we have the job creation law here. The land is completely controlled by the investor. By legalization of job creation law, actually there is no more sign to prevent the farmland conversion, although the technical irrigated rice field. The capitalist investor could completely control the use of land in Indonesia according to their own interests. In next 30 years, the farmland will completely disappear, and Indonesia will depend on the imported food. It is actual challenge about how to preserve farmland and provide food for the people independently. And I would like to emphasize, it's need an Islamic view and solution. From the above data got from our research, we try to make any solution taken from the food management, the proper food management. Okay, in the history or in the Sirah Nabawiyah, we have the farmland Asik, Nata, Al-Katiba, and Fadak. I tell that there is a fertile agriculture land as a state property, Al-Fai, which was obtained by Prophet Muhammad after the Khaybar War. Then the Prophet grew this land into 17 blocks, and in each block is divided into 100 lots. So the land is divided into 1,700 lots. I get it from Sirah Ibn Hisam. And then the Khaybar land is distributed to Muslim people. The farmland of Asik, Nata, Al-Khatiba, and Fadak were distributed to the Muslim. And the Prophet himself got merely 120% of the land as a state-owned land. Here we have the data taken from Ibn Hisam Shirah. Among the Sahabat who got the part of the land are Abi Talib, and so on. Here we have the data: Ali bin Abi Talib, Az-Zubair bin Al-Awwam, Talha bin Ubaidillah, Umar bin Al-Khattab, Abdurrahman bin Auf, Asim bin Adi from Bani Al-Zan, Usayr bin Al-Husayr, Al-Harith bin Khajraj, Na'im Bani Bayadah, Bani Ubaidah, Bani Hara from Bani Salimah, Ubaid bin As-Siham, Sa'idah, Gifar bin Aslam, An-Najar, Harisa, and Aus. Part of them. Not all the people who get the land from Khaybar, taken from Ibn Hisam Sirah. Then, what is the meaning of this land distribution? Canceling the pre-Islamic tradition that only tribal chiefs were entitled to land. So the weak are only slaves to the chief. This is the meaning of land distribution. And then also every individual is obliged to provide food for his family. And then every individual who own agricultural land has to maintain the productivity of the land. The Prophet said, whoever own a piece of land, let them cultivate it. If he refuses to plant it, then give it to his brother. And if he refuses to give it to his brother, then leave the land. Recorded by Ad-Darimi, quoted from Ajaz Al-Karmi. And then the Prophet means the palm land of Fadak and Wadi al-Qurra. In the next expedition in Khaybar region, the Prophet Muhammad SAW obtained the agricultural land of Fadak and Wadi al-Qurra. Both of these land have source of 5 state on land. And then the Prophet Muhammad SAW didn't distribute this land, but his context, I would like to say that Muhammad made the food production center, and also Muhammad encouraged the individual people to produce their food for their family. So we find here, we have 2 sources of staple food here, from individual and from staple food from the state. And of course, the food center here is provided by the government and take the land from the state-owned land, not become a burden of individual farmer. Okay. In this context, we have also Al-Musaqah Cooperation Scheme. In managing the agricultural land of Fadak and Nadal Qura, the Prophet introduced the Al-Musaqah Cooperation Scheme, namely a partnership between landowner and tenant with a profit sharing ratio according to the agreement. And all costs come from the landowner. The Prophet Muhammad acted as the owner of the land, and the Khaybar Jews as a cultivator of the land. Ibn Hisham, taken from Ibn Hisham Shirah. So from this context, we found the Al-Musaqah concept. The Al-Musaqah scheme of cooperation between the landowner and the farmer, the tenant farmer. The structure of Fadak and Wada Qura land management. The Prophet Muhammad SAW appointed Abdullah bin Rawaha as supervisor of the land of Khaybar, Fadak, and Wada Qura until Abdullah died in Mu'tah War. And then the Prophet Muhammad appointed the successor, Jabir bin Sakhar bin Umayyah. The Al-Musaqah cooperation with the Jews continue until the time of Umar bin Al-Khattab. Then the distribution of food product from Khaybar. Rasulullah SAW distributed and controlled the distribution of Khaybar product for Muslims. So the food production center is not merely produce the food, but the Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam control how to distribute properly to the people who need the food. It is said that the family of Osama bin Zaid received 200 wasak. Wasak is the traditional the traditional measurement in Arabic. Akin bin Abu Talib got 104 wasak. The son of Ja'far got a share of 50 wasak, and so on. We can see in the Sirah. And this is the data taken from this Sirah, and of course, incomplete. And then countering the Khaybar food distribution, the Prophet Muhammad SAW will that the group of Rahawiyin and Adariyin, As-Subayin, Al-Asariyin, each of them to get 100 wasak of Khaybar wheat. Umar bin Al-Khattab acknowledged and paid attention to this will. And as a head of state, Umar carried out this will of Muhammad, this wasiyah of Muhammad. So I would like to say as a conclusion here, how to yield the food in Islamic concept. We have the concept of dual system in staple food providing. For the provision of staple food, Islam recognized a dual system, namely, first, food procurement by individual and food procurement by the state. The state is obliged to provide staple food for the people, include providing the farmland from the state-owned land, not become a burden of individual, but the state obliged to provide to the land to make the food production center. So the protected food farmland is not individual property, but the state-owned land. I would like to say this food farmland, which is provided by the state-owned land, might not be converted the procurement of food by individual is optional. Individual landowner may use their land for farming or for other purposes. And food production center and food distribution. The food production center provided by government is not merely to produce the staple food, but also has a task to distribute properly the staple food to the people. Thus, in the Islamic view, there are two sources of staple food: the state-owned food production center and food from the private individual farmer. The balance of food supply from these two sources will lead to the stable food prices, and there is the need to make limitation testing for food prices. So, its implementation in modern society, the government or local government should provide land as food production center to meet the need of staple food. The government-owned food production center is the protected food farmland, which is not allowed to convert to other use. The food production center owned by local government could make close partnership with the farmer group in the scheme of al-mushaqah. On the other hand, the government could support and encourage the individual landowner to optimize the land productivity, but it is optional, depend on the individual purposes, depend on the individual farmer. I think this is our presentation. We see from this presentation that in Islamic view and Islamic concept, the food supply will be continued. Food supply will be continued because it's controlled tightly and provided properly by the government. Now in Indonesia, the food providing is become the burden of the poor farmer. I think this is injustice. So the Islamic solution could be implemented in very fast time, inshallah. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam
wabarakatuh.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Jazakallah khair to Professor Maman for giving us some assurance that Islam can solve the problems of agricultural and food problems that are occurring throughout the world. Okay, let's move on now to the Q&A session, as I promised earlier. So we have already received some of the questions from the audience, both from our Zoom chat and also from YouTube. So let's just move on now to the first question that is for Brother Farouk Ibn Qashr. Brother Farouk, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So this question has to do with the adaptability of capitalism. Of course, you have already mentioned that, it's very fragile, it's very not resilient and not, prosperous, of course. But some say that, crisis after crisis that undergoing in capitalist system can always be fixed. They can always restore themselves to, to reshape a new look of capitalism. So how can you say about it?
Yeah, this is a very good question, actually. One I would probably tend to agree with. It seems that capitalism in its origins is built on some ideological compromise, and that compromise really was reached at the inception of course, the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. And it seems that, they have made a way to sort of accommodate different schools of thought, different ideas into the economic system. So if you look at the history of capitalism, you start with classicalism, you move to Keynesianism, you merge the two into neoclassicalism and neo-Keynesianism, and you look at the rise of monetarism, and you look at the rise of Austrianism, and then now you're in a situation where you have the new neoclassical synthesis, basically a mishmash of all ideas. It seems that capitalism reformulates, restructures itself in a very pragmatic way to deal with crises after crisis. So my view, my personal view, is that capitalism's reign will only end when a viable alternatives manifests in reality to challenge it. Until that point, we may expect to see continuous revisions, compromises, some mishmash of the same debunked and defunct ideas. So yeah, I would tend to agree with that statement, although it's not necessarily the case that capitalism survives. In fact, it may be replaced by an alternative system that is not capitalism, but suffers from very similar issues because, of course, it's man-made and so on.
Okay. So there should be an external factor beyond the economic system itself that should replace.
We cannot rely on some undetermined, indefinite demise of a system we know inevitably will collapse. As Muslims, we must be actively working and engaged in an endeavor and a movement to usurp the reins of capitalism and not wait until it basically takes down the rest of the world with it.
Yeah, of course. So we can't wait until the capitalism dies for itself. So we have to offer, the alternative. Okay, thank you. Very good point. Okay, the second question that we have already received, this is actually for Dr. Fawzi Abraham. So Dr. Fawzi, are you still connected? Okay, Dr. Fawzi, are you still with us? Okay. So maybe we can move on first to Professor Maman for, the question that we have already received. So if the countries in Asia agree to create a new order in the state system, for example, and then get an economic embargo from the world, do you think that these countries can survive with food security? So do you get the point? Let me repeat. So if the countries in if all Asian countries, let's say, agree to create a new order in the state system, whatever system might be, and then get an economic embargo from the world, let's say the European countries, the United States, launch an embargo for the world to come. Do you think that these countries can survive with food security? Let's say Asian countries, they do all agree to create a new world order, and then there's an embargo from other parts of the world, from Europe, from Africa. Yeah, walaikum assalam, Dr. Fawzi. I'll come back to you later. Okay, so going back to Prof. Maman. So let's say if countries in Asia, they all agree to create a new world order that is basically different from our recurring system, and then the rest of the world launched an embargo, economic embargo, to the new world to come, to the new state, let's say. Do you think that these countries, the new country, can survive with food security? Do you think that we have security in food, even regardless of the embargo from wherever we get?
I think it's maybe for the question for me. I think the good question, yeah. But in the problem of the food, we should have independent, not depend on the other countries. So if we depend on the other countries, it is a very serious problem. So in Islamic concept, when Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, after the conquer the Khaybar, he tried to make food facilities to get self-sufficient for the Medina population, for the Islamic state of Medina. So it is a prohibition to depend on the other countries. But now I would like to say that if our country here united with other countries in the world, maybe we will get the food security because we have the rich of natural resources in Indonesia as well as in other countries. So we can make these human resources, make this sort of nature benefited to make self-sufficiency and food security in a proper condition.
Yeah.
But how the way? I think the way should refer to what the Muhammad has give a good example after Khaybar war. So Muhammad get the state-owned country, Al-Fai. And then Al-Fai is provided to make a food center, to make a food production center. And then how the private sector, I mean the individual farmer, for the individual farmer is actually optional. They could use their land to agricultural activity and the other uses according to their interests. That is the way we can take from Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the case of Khaybar. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair to your answer, Professor. So yeah, that's no surprise. Yeah, you know, the world natural resources are concentrated mostly on Muslim countries. So yeah, we have not to be afraid. Of embargo or anything whatsoever. If you know, let's say a new system is actually built up, because we believe that God has provided us with limitless resources. Okay, let's go back now to Dr. Fawzi Abu Khalil. Dr. Fawzi, are you already with us?
Yes, I'm here. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Okay, there's a question that we received, and I think it's for you.
I'm trying to start the video, but it says you can you disabled it.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it's technical problem. So sorry for that. What about now? Can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes. I'm trying to start the video, but it says you disabled it.
Okay. Okay, let me just fix it.
It's okay, go ahead, that's fine.
So the question that we received is, why are insurance companies, especially in the USA, so powerful in public health? Then where is the role of the government of the superpower, what so-called superpower country, if they're being dominated by the companies?
In the healthcare system in the United States is a capitalistic healthcare system, which depends not just on the healthcare, on the companies. And when we're talking about the healthcare, it's basically like any other even system in the country. It's run by the companies in general, whether like pharmaceutical companies or the health insurance companies. So in terms of the health insurance, there are certain insurance that belong to the government, and the majority and the rest of the insurance is run by different private insurance companies, in which like the majority of the people in the United States have like health insurance, and the health insurance will provide like the coverage for the patients. And part of it is, as I mentioned this in the slides, it's part like if in a way it's like a monopoly to control the healthcare system through these companies. as you can see, like in the United States, as example, the deficiency in the healthcare resources, like in the hospitals and in the medical schools, even like despite there is high demand on the providers in the United States, with deficiency in the providers, they limit the numbers of students who go to medical schools, and they limit the numbers who are specialists in different medical specialties and subspecialties in the United States. With this restriction and monopoly, so this is being controlled by the health insurance. They want like a limited number of providers who provide care to the maximum number of patients in the hospitals, because the one who's end up paying to the providers and to the hospitals is the health insurance companies. So part of it, they are like behaving like another government, like in controlling this. So they do limit like the number of physicians, number of hospitals. So these health insurance company, they will provide the minimum possible amount of payment, whether to the hospitals or to the providers. So it's part of the deep state, like the big companies, whether the pharmaceutical companies or the health insurance companies. It's part of the deep state who's running the country.
Yeah. So basically, the private companies have more control over the healthcare system than the government then.
Correct. They have more control in the healthcare. Yes, correct.
Yeah. It's probably the basic nature of capitalism itself, when the governments are having hands-off toward the public affairs. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is like even in different aspects in the United States, other than the healthcare, it's like the government is dividing the rules among like big companies who are running the country. And this is expected. It's part of the capitalism, how the capitalistic ideology work. So it's different big companies who run the whole country. And those big companies there, it's like part of the deep state when it comes deeply to the system inside.
Yeah. Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Fawzi, for your answer on the issue. Okay, please note, ladies and gentlemen, both from YouTube as well as from Zoom, you can directly jump into our Q&A session by easily writing down your questions on the chat box.
Actually, there is a question for me in the room chat.
In the room chat, yes. I was about to mention that. Okay. But the rest of the audience, please, you can also join in the Q&A by, writing the questions and answers, questions especially, on the box of chat that is available both on Zoom as well as on YouTube. Okay, so the next question is from Elisa Julianti, and this is for Professor Maman. So what do you think about the food estate concept that is implemented by Indonesian government? So what is the Islamic view on the concept called food estate?
Yeah, I think, yes, we know about the concept of food estate implemented or planned by the Indonesian government. But I think the concept of food estate organized by the government is unclear concept of the land. The question is, whose land is provided for food estate? The state-owned land or the individual farmer land? So in the Islamic concept, the land provided for food center or food production center should be the state-owned land, as we can see from the Khaybar case in the Muhammad era. So, but if the food estate is take the individual farmer land, I think the problem is will be the same, and the farmer will get small revenue. So maybe they will get unhappy to manage their land. Yeah. So I see the main role to produce the food is not by the individual farmer, but it should provided mainly by the government. I think this is the problem.
Okay.
And I would like to see the in Zoom chart. The
Yeah.
second question for me. Yeah.
There's also a question from Sumarni.
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum, Prof. Maman, about the food security in Indonesia. We have all the resources to self-fulfill or even export the food to other countries. But in reality, we still depend on import, which jeopardize our farmers' product. So what do you think about the protection from the policymaker to our farmers?
Okay. I think we agree that we have rich in natural resources. I think our land is fertile. But the problem is the farmer gets more revenue of the farmer. So, and the food security becomes the burden of the farmer. So, because the small revenue of the farmer, we have the evidence that have the strong unwillingness of the farmer to cultivate their land. We see a research in Cianjur area and also in Indramayu, as I presented previously. So the farmer in Indramayu, I think the farmer in Bangon 2 Indramayu had a strong reject to the planning of land protection for agricultural food production. Because the farmer know they will get a small revenue if their farmland is provided for food production. So if they use their land to the other uses outside the agriculture sector, they will get the more advantage, more benefit. That is the real problem. Yeah? So in the young generation, as I have data presented previously, there is a strong unwillingness to cultivate their land. So they also have a strong tendency to sell their land after their parent passing away. The case we found in Cianjur area. By this case, I'd like to conclude that food provision, food procurement should clearly provided by the government by benefited the state on land, not become a burden of the individual farmer, the poor farmer, the small farmer, in the case of Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Professor Maman, for your insightful answer. Okay, I'll go back to Brother Farouk, as we have already received a question. But before I touch upon the question that we received here from Zoom, Dr. Julian has raised his hand. Maybe he would like to put it forward directly. So please, off you go, Dr. Julian.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you for attention. I wanna question to Brother Farouk Ibn Qashir. The first, you discussed earlier about taxation. Yeah? How do economics think in Islamic system? And then, in your opinion, how much longer a breakdown of the capitalist system will the less? Because you explained that the capitalist system is so broken. Okay, thank you.
Could you repeat your first point? What was the first? Yeah, the first question, did you?
Okay. But what is it? Repeat your first question.
Okay. I want to question about economics. Brother Farouk, maybe just now you have to explain and describe about crisis capitalism. Now I want to question to you. The first, you discussed early about taxation. Yeah, how the economic thing in an Islamic system, and then in your opinion, how much longer the breakdown of the capitalist system will last? Because you explained that the capitalist system is so broken.
Okay,
Thank you,
I didn't quite catch what you meant. I heard the word taxation. I know the second question you asked about how long capitalism will last. Well, I'll seek to answer that. If you can let me know what you meant by this word taxation. I can't remember. I couldn't hear what you said. But anyway, capitalism, I mean, will last as long as policymakers are willing to reimagine its principles in different forms. And I don't foresee, like I mentioned previously, an immediate end to capitalism. And it's very hard. I mean, any economist who says they can predict the future is either a moron or a liar, right? There's no way that they can foresee when capitalism will capitulate. What is certainly clear, what we can look at the reality, is that capitalism is failing on multiple levels. Yes. It is failing to deliver the goods. It's failing to allocate resources. It's failing to control inflation. It's failing to distribute capital. It's failing to organize monetary and fiscal policy. It's failing to tame unemployment. In however way you look at it, you can see the observable reality that capitalism is failing on multiple levels. Now, how that ends, what is the nadir, the apotheosis, the final stage, is very hard to tell. But we can see that it's very weak. That's the only thing we can say. And so I can't give a very final date, but what I can say is that if there were to be a challenger to capitalism, if there was to be a system that rose above a lot of the other decrepit nonsense that is currently being proposed in place of capitalism, if it were to rise above that and challenge capitalism, I'm sure capitalists would have a tough time defending their system. And I would imagine that very quickly we would see an end to this ideology.
Yeah. Okay, great answer. Thank you very much. Now, we also received a question. I think this is also for you. What is relationship between economic policy with ideology in the state? Because it seems that these two overlaps one another.
Yeah, economic ideology drives economic policy. Okay, I discussed very briefly many schools of thought under capitalist, ideology that have existed since its inception. For example, you have the classical school of thought, which championed free marketeerism. You had the Keynesian school of thought, which championed intervention within the market. You had monetarist schools of thought, which argued to control the money supply. All of them may have different styles and means, like different madhahib of the aqidah of capitalism. But what is clear, that they share the same aqidah. They share the same goals of growth. Regardless of the school of thought that you think about, regardless of the madhab you're interested in, they all share this, hope for growth, pumping GDP, pumping GNP. That's the key priority in their books. And there's a lack of focus on distribution and some of the main things I discussed. So they all share the same thing. So the policy, you will notice under all of these schools of thought, under the history of capitalism, pushes one thing. It is growth. How do we can disagree about how we can preserve growth and how we can propound it, but the key priority is growth, and that is essentially being driven by the economic ideology. And so all policies come from your key fundamental beliefs about the market and the human and so on and so forth, its relationship.
Okay, Jazakallah khair for your point. Okay, I'll go back to Prof. Maman. There's also a question. We received 2 questions, I assume. So one from YouTube and also one from Zoom. Here from Zoom comes from Okay, so I think I'll go to the YouTube question first. It's from Nida Saadah. Question to Professor Maman. In this era, economic Islam developed just as Islamic finance. This why, etc. Why there's no convention about Baitul Mal, estate finance of Islamic country? But I think it's more suitable for Brother Farooq. But if Prof Maman would like to give some remarks on this issue, please.
Thanks. I think I also see from the Zoom chat
from
here.
Zoom. Yeah.
Okay, about the property right of the farmer. I think the land is the property right of the farmer. I mean the individual farmer. Of course, it should be protected. The right is should be protected properly. Okay. Here, the individual right of the farmer should be protected, especially in using the land for farming activity or the other uses. So the farmer should not be forced to use their land only in agriculture activity. This is the property right, the right of the farmer. But the question is, how about the food procurement? Actually, I would like to emphasize, don't let it become the burden of the farmer. So to produce the food for food procurement should be conducted properly by the government. And the government should provide the state on land. Like the Muhammad Balisi in the Khaybar Treaty after getting the entire land from the Khaybar. So Muhammad made the food production center. So the source of the food could be from the state on land, from the food production center on the government. And also the food could also from individual farmer. So if the balancing is acquired from the source of the pot, from the two sources of the food, so the price will be stable, will not be too high, and will not drop. The price will make the farmer lose. So this concept should be, I think it will be easily implemented if the policyholder have the high willingness to implement. So we can educate them to get clearly aware about the Islamic concept in food procurement, in food providing for the people. So maybe we can tell to the our government. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Jazakallah khair, Prof. Maman, for your notable and also very important answer. Okay, we have received tons of questions anyway, both from YouTube as well as from Zoom chat, and there's also some participants raising their hands. But unfortunately, we are running out of time. But before we close our session, I'd like to give back to the speakers to give your closing remarks on the subject that we have discussed that we have discussed so far. So maybe I'll go back to Dr. Fawzi Abu Khalil. I would give you around 2 to 3 minutes of closing remarks which regards the issue. Dr. Fawzi? Okay, can you still hear us? Okay, maybe I'll go back to Brother Farooq first. Can you please give us 3 minutes of closing remarks? with regard to the topic.
Jazakallah khair. Just my concluding statements is that I just want to thank everyone for, of course, listening to what I had to say today. I think the key message of my talk was that the Islamic economic system has the capacity to resolve a lot of the problems that we are witnessing in the recovery, let's say, or at least on the route to more crises from COVID. We are going to witness over the coming quarters very high levels of inflation across the world, drops in GDP and growth, rises in unemployment and joblessness. We will see governments scamper across the world to try and resolve what ultimately is basically inherently part of the capitalist system. And we should be, as Muslims, at the forefront of presenting the Islamic economic system as a solution to these problems. Be it, for example, for inflation, where we have a novel, historically pro-historical monetary system like the bimetallic gold and silver standard, or, for instance, the labor market, which is far more adaptable, resilient towards shocks. We're seeing, for example, in the Western world today, a complete capitulation of the labor market as a result of unionization, and also as a result of government-led policies that are simply not allowing wages to keep up with inflation. So main point, of course, that I wish to conclude on is that Islam has the ability to fix these issues, and we really need to be prioritizing Islam within the discussion of academia. My last point, which I want to really emphasize, is that as academics, we tend to err on the side of objectivity. And when it comes to us as Muslims, I'm afraid that we must forego that luxury of sitting on the fence. We must discard this useless notion of philosophy, and we should inherit the work of the Sahaba and the work of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We should embrace normativity and activism because unfortunately we do not have time for pointless exercises in research that seem to only occupy the minds of the inane and the frivolous in the upper echelons of academia. Unfortunately, we must take the work for example, the re-establishment of the Khilafah in our top priority, and use our knowledge on economics particularly, as well as, of course, politics and the rest, as you've heard today, to facilitate that work. But that will be my concluding statement, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, wa alaikum assalam. Okay, I'll go now to Dr. Fawzi. Dr. Fawzi, can you hear now? Okay, maybe to Professor Mama.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, Dr. Fawzi, okay. Yeah, can you please give us 3 minutes of closing remarks regarding the topic that we've discussed so far?
Hello.
Yes. Dr. Fawzi, can you hear us? Okay. Okay, maybe we can just go directly to Professor Maman. Can you please give us 3 minutes of closing remarks?
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. So we are interested to educate many people here. We are interested to talk to the local government and to the central government, and also to the member of parliament about the Islamic concept, especially in food providing. So actually, we can say to them that the government should make the food production center taken from the state on land. The state on land not merely given to the investor, but please the government to make the food center. And in this context, the center or local government can make a cooperation with the local farmer. So by this policy, the agricultural development will get continue and will be get sustainability in a proper condition and in a good condition. So I would like to say that the Islamic concept could solve the crucial problem in food providing. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Professor Maman, for giving us the closing remarks on the topic. I was about to go back to Dr. Fawzi, but it seems that Dr. Fawzi is having, unstable connection. So yeah, of course, we would like to, discuss more on the topic, because it's not enough for us to just end in our discussion. Our, issues in lives regarding, what's going on around the world, and also the compatibility with our belief system in Islam, for example, of course, it's worth discussing, but not just discussing, but also fighting for, and also implementation one day, inshallah. But I'm afraid, because of the limited time, we have to end our session. But I do really want to appreciate all the participants, all the presenters, for coming with us for the 2 consecutive days so far. I do really hope that we can, keep working on it, and then also keep in touch, just to, coordinate, collaborate, maybe in the work of not just academics, but also as Muslims, that we have to fight for our, Islamic systems in many concepts and many systems. Okay, on behalf of all the committee, I would like to apologize for all the problems that are going on, technical problems probably, that are occurring for the past 2 days. But before we end our session, I would like to have a photo session. So can you please turn all of your camera? We have how many pages? Can I have a look? So can you please turn on all of your cameras to take a photo session? So thank you very much. Please open your camera. I'll be glad if you're using your real name. Any participants, you're using your real name, and then also opening up your camera. Okay, how many pages can I see?
Okay.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, thank you. Next page, probably. Okay.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Sip.
Okay, the last page.
Next page. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay. Any more page? Is that all?
Host, my camera, host.
Yes, last page. 1, 2, 3. Sip. Finish.
Okay, my camera.
Okay, Jazakallah khair for your coming for 2 consecutive days. Let's end our session with Kafaratul Majlis prayer. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Okay, thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, Jazakallah khair everyone.
Islam ajaran sampurna sumebar kasakuliah dunya ku Rasul sareng sahabat dilajeng para khalifah waktos harita mentas ka Nusantara jong anjong di tanah Pasundan ti harita ngadeg Sunan Gunung Jati katengah Kangjeng Sunan Patahila beras ka Banten Sultan Hasanuddin tereh teu benteng